to I-24 News. You're watching Middle East Now, a special edition, and I'm your host, Bianca Zanini. Let's dive right into it with tonight's headlines. U.S. President Donald Trump welcomes Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the White House for talks about war, hostages, and money. Stocks around the world plunging this morning with President Trump's global trade war ramping up. And reports that Iranian-backed militias in Iraq are willing to lay down their arms in the latest blow to Tehran. In exactly 1 hour, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to meet President Donald Trump at the White House. There's a lot on the agenda: the resumption of the war in Gaza and the return of the hostages held by Hamas, the threat of Iran and its proxies, particularly the Houthis, and the instability in Syria. But right at the top is Trump's recent decision to impose a 17% tariff on Israeli goods as part of his broader global tariff strategy. Now, joining us for the latest is our senior Washington correspondent, Mike Wagenheim, live with us from the White House. Mike, Netanyahu landed in Washington yesterday and has had quite a full schedule already, and soon he's about to meet President Trump. What can you tell us?
An impromptu visit here brought about by a phone call with Trump last Thursday, together with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who Netanyahu was visiting at the time. This meeting under the auspices of the tariff situation. And by the way, just moments ago, Trump announcing a 50% additional tariff on China as a result of Beijing's counter retaliation against the U.S. But neither here nor there. In terms of Israel, it's a chance for Netanyahu to kind of set the table here. He's the first foreign leader to meet one-on-one with Trump here in the White House regarding those tariffs. Maybe an opportunity to cut prices of American cars in Israel or break up the monopolies a little bit. Maybe something of actual benefit for Israel to come out of those conversations. But Trump is not going to give away something for nothing here. He doesn't want to set a precedent either in dealing with other countries and these tariffs. So if he's going to give away anything here, he's certainly going to have to get something of substance, one would think, in return. But in terms of the broader Middle East, well, obviously much to discuss here. The Americans are continuing to pour resources into defeating or at least containing the Houthi rebels there in Yemen. The CNN report indicating over $1 billion has gone into that effort just over the last month and a half that Trump has really driven up the amount of strikes on the Houthi rebels here. So an opportunity to coordinate with Prime Minister Netanyahu as to kind of how to handle this seemingly never-ending threat here from the Houthis and the larger threat of Iran. There's been some whispers here about some potential military action vis-a-vis Tehran, talk about negotiations between Washington and Tehran on a revived nuclear deal. The Islamic Republic says we are not going to go for direct negotiations or open to indirect negotiations. The Trump administration essentially says that's a waste of time, and time is not on the side of the mullahs right now there in Tehran. So again, an opportunity to coordinate and a chance to reframe the conversation here on Gaza. Remember, the last time the Prime Minister was here, the news that came out of that was driven for weeks by Trump's announcement about his vision for Gaza. And a couple weeks later, the Arab world gave their reply. It wasn't really an inspired plan that they generated, kind of chock full of the same old ideas. And we haven't heard much about a day after plan for Gaza since. Of course, the big reason is the Israel-Hamas ceasefire completely fell apart. And if those paying attention here, we haven't heard a whisper out of the White House, really, or at least from Trump, about the hostages since we had that delegation of freed hostages that came here several weeks ago. And Trump put out his Shalom Hamas message, saying if they didn't free the hostages immediately, essentially, there'd be all heck breaking loose in the Middle East. But really nothing about the Gaza plan, nothing about the hostages now in weeks. So an opportunity here with the ceasefire fading away to reframe, reset that conversation between Trump and Netanyahu to coordinate a path forward here and at least reviving some cessation of hostilities to try to get more of those hostages out, which is a huge priority, or at least it was, for the Trump administration in its opening couple of months back in office.
Right, and Mike, certainly a lot on the table, opportunities and a lot of potential directions the meeting can go in. If we're looking at what is the main thing that Netanyahu is hoping for in this meeting and that Trump is hoping for with this meeting, both when it comes to content but also imaging, let's put it that way, what are the sides aiming for?
Well, divergent interest here, and that's one of the things we're continuing to see when it comes to the U.S.-Israel relationship. You know, we can talk about ironclad relationship, shared values, all that good stuff, but in the end, when you're dealing with the Trump administration, when you're dealing with the Netanyahu government, they're looking out for their own interest in the end. I think Trump really wants to set a precedent here on how tariffs are going to be handled going forward, set the tone that he's not somebody who's going to be pushed over, he's not going to be somebody who's taken advantage of here. I don't know if it was smart in the end that Netanyahu is the first one to approach him about this issue, because again, we're not going to see Trump give away something for nothing here. On the other side, what does Netanyahu want? He wants backing on Iran. He wants to make sure that the Trump administration is not taking their eye off the ball here, that they're continuing to implement that so-called maximum pressure campaign on Tehran, and possibly coordinating, although it seems the Trump administration is reticent to do so, military action if need be.
All right, Mike Weigenheim live with us from Washington. Thank you very much. Now, the United States under Donald Trump's administration has focused a lot of its foreign policy energy on the Middle East. Two key strands are central to how Trump approaches the region, as our correspondent Robert Swift explains.
The United States stunned allies and enemies alike in recent weeks as the administration of President Donald Trump laid out its global foreign policy positions. But on the Middle East, the differences between the new leadership and the Biden administration are more subtle. Two main themes characterize the Trump approach: maximum pressure and a willingness to negotiate with anyone.
I thought we had a deal, an acceptable deal. I even thought we had an approval from Hamas. Maybe that's just me getting duped.
Both of these characteristics were seen in the initial success of Steve Witkoff to bring a ceasefire to the Israel-Gaza war. Hamas publicly, and the Israeli government more privately, were left with little doubt about what the White House wanted.
If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East.
33 Israelis were released from Gaza, with many former hostages singling out Trump for personal praise in achieving their release.
President Trump, I am eternally grateful that you helped bring me home from captivity. I know you will not stop your efforts to secure the release of the 59 remaining hostages.
But as the momentum bled from the negotiations, including direct talks between Hamas and the White House, Trump returned to maximum pressure by threatening to expel all Gazans from their home, and laterally by green-lighting Israel's return to military operations in Gaza.
Seems like Netanyahu will not stop his war on Gaza until we are displaced, but despite the extermination, we will not migrate.
Last month, Trump appeared to gradually walk back his comments on expulsion, though Israel continues to factor it into its day-after planning, launching an agency to assist Gazans to leave voluntarily and seeking states to take them in. Elsewhere in the Middle East, a similar approach is being taken. While the US is deploying more military assets to the region, including long-range bombers, and ramping up economic pressure on Iran, it has also said it is willing to engage Tehran in direct negotiations over its nuclear ambitions.
It's better if we have direct talks. I think it goes faster and you understand the other side a lot better.
Daily US strikes against the Houthis, an escalated continuation of a Biden admin policy, can be seen as additional pressure on Iran. Following Israel's decimation of Hezbollah in the autumn and the unforeseen secondary effect of regime change in Syria, Israel has renewed freedom of movement to its north, allowing the US to take a more standoff role in both countries while engaging diplomatically with their new governments.
We have set clear red lines from the United States. So the end of Hezbollah's reign of terror in Lebanon and around the world has started.
Ultimately, the success or failure of the Trump administration's approach to the Middle East may come down to one nation, Saudi Arabia. Already the host nation for much of the White House's diplomatic efforts, a breakthrough between the kingdom and Israel could be a turning point for the region, cementing the image of the Abraham Accords from Trump's first presidency.
And if you remember, last time I went to Saudi Arabia, I put them first on the list because they agreed to buy $450 billion worth of American goods. And I agreed to do it again, and they've agreed to spend close to $1 trillion of money in our American companies, which to me means jobs.
Potentially just one of the reasons Trump chose Saudi to host his first foreign visit again.
And with us in the studio this evening are I-24 News correspondents Balih Sladin and Nicole Zedek. Nicole, we quickly mentioned this with Mike Wagenheim here. What is Netanyahu's main goal for this meeting? I know the tariffs are on the table, but there are also still the other issues, Gaza, Iran, Syria. What is his main goal here? It's the second time he's meeting him in just a few months.
And that in itself is one of the big accomplishments that Netanyahu wants to tout, just being invited himself to the White House. He was the first leader that Donald Trump invited face-to-face, and now he's the second one meeting with him in just 2 months, when Netanyahu claims there is a long list of some 50-plus world leaders that wish they could be having this meeting, specifically when it comes to tariffs. But us sitting here in Israel know that tariffs aren't necessarily the main dilemma that we're facing right here. As you mentioned, there's a wide list of issues that Netanyahu is likely going to address, and it all comes under the headlines maybe of tariffs. It's really more the Gaza war, as we're 18 months since October 7th today. That is when that meeting is taking place. There's the issue of Iran and how the United States is also upping their rhetoric against Iran. There's also this Israel-Turkey relationship that we're seeing come to a forepoint when it comes to Syria and the actions that Israel's taken in Syria to make sure that Turkey doesn't get a stronger stance inside. And there's also the issue of the ICC. In fact, this meeting itself, as our correspondent Mike Wagenheim pointed out, came during a pretty monumental visit from Netanyahu and Israel's stance from Netanyahu's visit to Hungary. They had a phone call between the Hungarian Prime Minister Netanyahu and Trump, and that's when this meeting happened, when Trump invited him. But that in itself, when it comes to the ICC and Hungary taking away their arrest warrant and withdrawing from the ICC in itself, that doesn't mean it's all smooth sailing when it comes specifically to Netanyahu's arrest warrants with the ICC. Even for him to get from Hungary to the United States, he had to fly about 250 miles out of the way. So he didn't fly over the Netherlands, over Iceland, or over Ireland. 3 countries that they were scared if there had to be an emergency landing and they had to stop there. They were scared that these countries might implement the ICC arrest warrant and arrest Netanyahu. So 250 miles out of the way just to get to Washington, D.C. shows that the ICC is also an issue that's likely going to come up. But still, the main ones from Israel's perspective is likely Gaza and Iran.
All right, and I want to ask you, Balih, what are the main concerns here in Israel when it comes to this meeting? How is it being described?
Yes, definitely. There is part of the Israeli public, let's say, that is very concerned about the Trump's patience being running out because of the continuation of the war in Gaza and the fact that the hostages are not returned. But I would say that others in Israel, me included, think that we did not hear any public statement by the Trump administration saying that their patience is running out. And also, we haven't heard any leaks from any of the Trump's officials talking about such a thing. And I think that this administration knows better than any of the previous administrations that with Hamas's presence in the Gaza Strip and Hamas staying in power and maybe even declaring victory in this war, the other goals or the main goal of the Trump administration in the Middle East would not be possible, which is leaving the Middle East for good, decreasing the number of the troops in the Middle East, and of course to be able to focus on China and also on Russia, Ukraine. If the Trump administration does pressure Israel to give in get the hostages out, but leave Hamas in power, they can at any point do an October 7th like attack and disrupt any normalization efforts between Israel and Saudi Arabia or any other states. Plus, of course, that would be a sign of weakness in front of the bigger enemy in the Middle East, which is Iran, of course. That's why I think the scenario of Trump pressuring Israel to give in for Hamas is not possible. And apparently, we're going to see yet another time that Trump is standing beside Israel in this issue as well.
All right, so a lot of positives likely to come out for Israel from this meeting. What is Trump hoping to get out of this meeting? I mean, the focus, of course, comes at a time of the tariffs.
Exactly. I guess that Netanyahu here is returning favor for Trump after the green light that the Trump administration gave Israel in terms of what is happening in Gaza. Now Netanyahu wants to return that favor. This meeting, if they actually reach an agreement, that would be a win-win situation. Why? Because Netanyahu here is starting this pilgrimage toward Trump in order to negotiate tariffs policy. Netanyahu can say, I was the first one to be invited and I succeeded to reach a deal. Trump would say, if you come to me and make some concession, we will get along. We can go through this. That means that Netanyahu apparently is wanting to return the favor for Trump and starting this pilgrimage to the Trump administration.
All right, so before the meeting even begins, there's a very possible win-win here for both sides. Now, staying on the topics of the tariffs, stocks around the world plunged this morning as the consequences of President Trump's global trade war are being felt globally. Asian markets collapsed after China hammered the U.S. with its own hefty tariffs, and Trump has since responded, ramping up the trade war that many fear could spark a recession as investors fled on the worst day for equities since the COVID pandemic. Now, President Donald Trump's new tariffs are described as larger than expected, and countries around the world are preparing how to respond or have begun responding, creating even more ripples. There's more in this report.
The selling in Asia was across the board, with no sector left unharmed as Asian stock markets fell Monday. Investors then increasing their bets on the risk of a recession and a rate cut by the United States as early as May due to concerns about a global trade war. Since U.S. President Donald Trump announced new import tariffs last week, Japan's Nikkei share average fell nearly 9% at opening, while China's Shanghai Composite Index opened down 148 points, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index suffered its biggest one-day drop in 30 years, closing at 13.2% down. Talking to reporters aboard Air Force One, Trump said that he was not intentionally engineering a market sell-off.
I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something.
In Europe, shares plunged to a 16-month low, the European Commission president describing the tariffs as a major blow to the world economy, adding that the European Union was prepared to respond with countermeasures if talks with Washington failed.
Let's be clear-eyed about the immense consequences. The global economy will massively suffer. Uncertainty will spiral and trigger the rise of further protectionism.
Do we end up in this risk situation where other countries will respond with tit-for-tat style retaliation? Do you have a setting where particular countries will reach out and try and negotiate deals?
Speaking of negotiation, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in Washington, D.C. on Sunday as Israeli goods now face a 17% U.S. tariff under the decisive new policy, despite Jerusalem's action a day earlier to lift all remaining duties on U.S. imports in a last-minute attempt to preempt the move. Netanyahu stated on Sunday that he hopes Trump will lower tariffs on Israel at their meeting on Monday, given the U.S. is Israel's biggest trading partner and closest ally.
What are you and Prime Minister Netanyahu going to speak about tomorrow?
We're going to talk about trade, and we're going to talk about the obvious subject. You know what the obvious subject is.
Do you have any news for us on the obvious subject?
I'm trying to do trade just to keep it down. No, look, there's a lot of things going on with the Middle East right now that have to be silenced.
As trillions of dollars have been wiped off stocks worldwide and more than 50 countries reach out to the president to begin negotiations, the Israeli Prime Minister will be the first leader to meet with Trump since last week's announcement.
Now, of course, the markets here in the Middle East also tumbled, struggling with a double hit, the new American tariff policy and a sharp decline in oil prices. To break this down and explain the potential consequences of all of this is Dr. Alex Coleman, an economy expert at the Tel Aviv University. Thank you so much for being here tonight. The first big question has to be, how big of a deal is this? How concerning is it?
Well, okay, the way I see Trump, I see him like this big blonde elephant who is going crazy. And what I believe is that, like every big blonde elephant, eventually he will lose volume and would fold back into his lair.
So like a blow-up elephant?
Yes.
A balloon?
Because part of what he did is very reasonable, like tariffs on China, things like that. Parts of what he did are completely bogus. Just as an example, the fact that tariffs on Iran are 10%. First of all, there's a boycott on Iran. Second of all, why should tariffs on Iran be lower than on the rest of those? So it's really, you need to abandon any reason.
All right. But the question remains, though, how bad is it on a global level? Like, we're starting to see the responses of countries. So let's say, how bad can it get?
Okay. First of all, lots of people have lost tons of money. Okay, that's something that's undebatable, and it really and it causes panic, because you look at your. I'm talking about people who are in retirement. So these are people who actually live off their savings, and they suddenly see that they've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's really devastating. And the good news is that when the pain is so widespread, and the world's richest people, such as Elon Musk and Trump and all these, they lost more money than us, even though, of course, they do not care that much. It's obvious that, and if you think about Trump, Trump came with the ticket that he is this financial genius who's going to make America great again. Well, if America goes into a recession, as is obvious, this is not really great again. So I see no other move than reverse.
No other move than reverse. I do want to ask you, though, we have started to see reports that Trump may delay some of these tariffs or soften the blow. Is this something we can expect to actually happen?
Well, that's also something funny, because people say, I mean, the understanding was that he's going to delay most of the tariffs except for China, but now they say that it's not true. So this is another thing. I mean, one of the important measures is the VIX, which is the fear index, which indicates how scared the markets are. And this has gone through the roof. I mean, it's more than twice what it used to be before Trump's statement. So the fact that there's so much uncertainty and there's such a big earthquake, a potential earthquake, so the markets are really hysterical. And yes, I do believe that on the way to reverse, you would move into neutral and then into reverse. I cannot see this happening. Again, part of the tariffs are completely meaningless. Not meaningless. I mean, you don't want all the industries to go back to the U.S. For instance, some industries are causing a lot of pollution. So you don't want these industries to come back into the U.S. The U.S. likes the fact that China is much more lenient towards pollution-creating industries, such as in the ink, etc.
So maybe this is perhaps more of a shock effect, and then we'll see some reasonable steps being...
Yes, absolutely.
That's at least the hope here.
I guarantee that that's what Trump is going to do.
All right, Alex Coman, a guarantee from you is a guarantee for us. Thank you very much.
Like the value of...
Now, while U.S. President Trump is meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu in Washington, China, Russia, and Iran are meeting tomorrow in Moscow to discuss Iran's nuclear program. Iran says it is waiting for an American response to their proposal for indirect nuclear talks. Trump has so far said he wants direct talks, and he warns that if a deal isn't reached, military options, of course, are on the table. Let's take a listen.
We're now waiting to see what the United States decides in this matter. Iran's offer for indirect talks is a generous one, based on a responsible and well-thought-out decision, taking into account the history of this issue and how nuclear negotiations have played out over the past decade.
Now, Nicole, I want to ask you, is there realistically a deal that both Donald Trump and Iran can be satisfied with?
Doesn't seem like we've gotten to that point so far, and that's why we're seeing everything continue to be delayed. We're hearing this hefty rhetoric from both places, and it becomes more and more volatile by the week. We're not only hearing words, we're hearing action and seeing action, not only in the United States. Let's remind our viewers, the U.S. recently sent 6 B-2 bombers to the region. They're sitting in the Indian Ocean at the Diego Garcia Air Base. Now, this is major because what many people don't even realize, the United States only has 20 of these high-class bombers. That means 30% are here in the region within fighting distance of Iran. The United States doesn't do that if they don't actually think that there is a credible military threat with Iran. Still, the United States want to see direct negotiations, but this is not something that Iran wants to see. They want to see these indirect channels through Oman. But as it stands right now, when you say, is there a way that both of these countries can be satisfied, it doesn't seem so, because the United States doesn't want to continue with these prolonged negotiations, these back channels that we saw with the Biden administration.
But let's be realistic. Even if they do have direct negotiations, even if that does happen, Iran is still able to prolong it and prolong it and prolong it, and that way, through doing this, make sure that there is no actual deal that's signed, and also make sure that there's no attack.
This is a good way to be thinking if you weren't necessarily dealing with U.S. President Donald Trump. As we've seen through the markets and everything that we're talking about, the one thing you can expect is to expect the unexpected. We're not talking about a president that likes to be toyed around. When he sets a deadline, it seems these other countries are actually listening, or there should be a real threat, because even if he says these absurd statements that, we're going to bomb everywhere in Iran is worried, and they've set themselves on high alert as well, preparing for some sort of an escalation, even though this is not what necessarily the United States wants right now. This is not what Iran wants right now. That doesn't mean it won't happen.
It won't happen.
And it doesn't mean that if Iran tries to play this out and withdraw these negotiations, Trump is going to just give them time and buy them time and listen to them. That doesn't seem to be the way that Trump has been working, even in these first 2 months back in the White House so far.
All right, well, we'll certainly be keeping an eye. Nicole Zedek, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Alex Coleman as well. Balir, you're staying with us for after the break. We have to go out now for just a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere. There's lots more to unpack when we come back in just a few minutes.
Dance, music, and magic immerse you in the story of Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem, an unforgettable musical where the past and present meet. Welcome to the heart of the most sought-after city in the world. A unique experience only at Kikar HaMusika. Reserve now at thisisjerusalem.co.il.
Bad posture. The ever-increasing hours we spend sitting, working, and even while trying to relax at home is twisting our vertebrae out of alignment and creating strain and pain on muscles, ligaments, and joints. A scientifically designed spine and back support device that uses precision biometric technology to perfectly align the back and spine for all-day comfort and support, creating perfect posture for your back every time you sit down. Now features extra-wide acupressure comfort pads, as well as an extended height back panel for even more support, making it perfect for all body types. Also features a precision wing design that perfectly cradles your back and spine with amazing ergonomic support that leaves you feeling refreshed and energized even after sitting all day.
Welcome back. You're watching Middle East Now, a special edition here on I24 News. I'm your host, Bianca Zanini. Now, in the largest rocket barrage from Gaza into Israel in months, Hamas last night fired 10 rockets at southern Israel. 5 were intercepted by Israel's air defense systems, but at least one of the other 5 hit the city of Ashkelon, causing damage and injuring 1 person. Hamas claimed responsibility. Israel promised the group will pay a heavy price. Meanwhile, aid organizations in Gaza are warning that the humanitarian situation is rapidly deteriorating on the Strip. Now, for the latest, we turn to I24 News' Robert Swift, who joins us live from the Israel-Gaza border. Robert, what more can you tell us? What's the latest from the ground?
Yeah, just as you started speaking, I heard a series of booms behind me. That sounds like the IDF once again conducting airstrikes in the north of the Gaza Strip. And about 15 minutes ago, there was a couple of Apache gunships in the air above us that were using their chain guns to fire down onto the ground in the north of Gaza. Now, that looks like continuing support from the air for the IDF operation. I don't think the mic is picking it up, but the booms, the airstrikes sound like they're going on continuously behind me. Now, that sounds like the IDF continuing air support for the troops on the ground in the north of Gaza. Now, that all takes place as you say, a series of the top human rights organizations have released a letter saying that they're extremely concerned about the continuing humanitarian situation inside the Gaza Strip. They said that there's supplies of medicine and food queuing up outside Gaza, unable to get in. And they also drew attention to the number of children that had been killed in attacks since hostilities started once again.
All right, Robert Swift, thank you very much for that update from the border between Israel and Gaza. Stay safe. And as he was talking about here, Robert, about the aid, is there an opening for a resumption of aid? And if that were to happen, what could that look like?
Yes, well, let's start with the story that was published on Ynet today, an Israeli media outlet, saying that the IDF is getting ready to re-enter or allow the entrance of the aid once again to the Gaza Strip. Now, if we look into what the IDF has responded to this, saying that Israel does not and will not allow aid entry to Hamas, and add to that also what the Prime Minister's office said about this report, saying that the IDF will reach the war aims in accordance with international law. First of all, that means that Israel is not planning to starve the people of Gaza to death if Hamas insists on continuing to hold the Israeli hostages and not releasing them. But on the other hand, if we add that to a report that we've talked about a couple of weeks ago about Israeli plans to separate the Gazan civilians from Hamas's militants or other Palestinian factions by creating some sort of a new humanitarian zone, but not like the ones that have been in the first part of the war, a new humanitarian zone that will be, of course, secured by Israeli troops or other security firms, and inspect everyone before they let them in, making sure, of course, that none of them is affiliated with Hamas or other Palestinian factions, and, of course, making sure that they don't carry weapons. This will create a situation where aid can be provided to the Gazans straight away without Hamas's involvement, making sure that Gazans get the aid, get what they want, Israel continue its war in accordance with international law, but, of course, not reaching Hamas.
All right, and I want to bring in some updates here. The IDF is saying that there was an interception just now outside of Israeli airspace from an unmanned aerial vehicle from the east. We will be updating that for you. Now, reports are coming out that a new Egyptian proposal has been put forward to secure a ceasefire in Gaza. It reportedly includes the release of 8 hostages in exchange for a truce lasting between 40 and 70 days. Now, today marks a year and a half since the October 7th massacre by Hamas. Families and supporters of some of the hostages are still being held in Gaza, gathered this morning outside the homes of several ministers, including of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The first protests began at 6:29 a.m. That's the moment Hamas terrorists breached the border to Israel and began their horrific attack. 59 hostages are still being held in Gaza, and protests are scheduled throughout the day today.
We are here near the house of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. We call upon you, Netanyahu, Trump, Please, it's been a year and a half. Bring them all home now. Netanyahu, you are free to go as you please. You can travel to the United States. Our brothers are not free. Let my people go.
And I believe you have a little bit more of information on that interception by the IDF.
Yes, it's the second time actually in 3 days that we see a drone that was fired from Yemen being intercepted outside of Israeli airspace, and that's more than 15 rockets and drones that were fired during these couple of weeks since the resumption of the war. And we see that almost half of them, if not more than half of them, were being intercepted outside of Israeli airspace. That means that apparently the American campaign against the Houthis is working. That could be a situation, but also the Israeli air defense system could be getting much better in, inspecting these drones and the missiles, and of course intercept them before they enter Israeli airspace. We should remember here that what the Houthis aim for is actually activating the sirens. They know that they can't force the Israelis, after all, by hitting Israeli targets inside Israel, military targets or civilian targets.
It's a psychological warfare.
It's a psychological warfare, and they want to win this war of information war, and that's why they are continuing their attacks. Again, apparently, the American campaign is working, and the Israeli air defense system is getting better at intercepting.
Especially when it comes to drones. I remember that when we started seeing this about a year ago, the drones were a major issue. You're saying that there seems to be an advancement on this point?
Definitely, and the Israeli military industry has been talking about getting better at intercepting drones since we have seen this or these drones being a new challenge for the Israeli air defense system when it comes to the war with Hezbollah. Of course, it's a different thing when we talk about Hezbollah. It's a short-range drone. It's a drone that is fired only a couple of kilometers from the border into Israeli towns and cities. It's a different thing when it comes to the Houthis that fired it from 1,500 kilometers. So anyway, the Israeli air defense system is working on this, has been working on this. We don't know if there is any official advancement, but definitely we see that on the ground.
All right, and just shortly here, because we are starting to run out of time, the information on the latest Egyptian proposal, what can you tell us?
Yes, so the Egyptians want to reaching some middle ground between Israel and Hamas. We remember that Israel wanted 10 Israeli living hostages to be released, or 11 for 50 days of ceasefire. Hamas wanted to release 5 Israeli hostages. Not all of them are alive, in exchange for 60 days of ceasefire. Now a new Egyptian proposal, according to sources speaking with the Sharq al-Awsat, Cairo presented a new proposal for a ceasefire that includes 40 to 70 days of ceasefire and the release of 8 Israeli hostages, 1 each week. That's what this proposal is saying. But the issue here is much bigger than this. It's about what's going to happen after the proposal, after the ceasefire, Hamas, of course, wants to see Israelis committing to continue the ceasefire to end the war, and Israel wants Hamas to leave the Gaza Strip.
No major changes there. All right, Walig Sladin, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Now, several Iranian-backed militias in Iraq have reportedly bowed to U.S. pressure and threats of strikes and have agreed to lay down their arms. This would be a huge blow for Tehran, significantly weakening yet another group of proxies. Joe Brown has more in this report.
America is back.
President Donald Trump's firm Middle East policy might just have yielded a big win. According to a report from Reuters, Iraqi militias under the proxy umbrella of the Iranian regime have agreed to put down their weapons as a result of American pressure. The report claims that since Trump took office, US officials have been relaying threats to Iraq, saying that if they don't cease operations, the US would strike Iran in a manner similar to the current American strikes on Houthi targets, another Iranian proxy, in Yemen. Iraqi militias have been an important arm of the Iranian proxy empire, and their importance has increased over the last 18 months because of the weakening of Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. Whilst Iraqi groups have sporadically fired missiles into Israel, they've been doing so much less frequently than their counterparts, thus the relative lack of IDF strikes. However, in recent months, they've also launched multiple attacks on US forces in Iraq and Syria. The Iraqi groups are comprised of around 10 Shiite factions and a total of 50,000 fighters. According to Reuters, some of the commanders have spoken to the Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani and have made steps to disarm. Some of these groups include Kataib Hezbollah, Nujaba, Kataib Sayyid al-Shuhada, and Ansarullah al-Awafiyah. And it would be in Iraq's best interest to have these groups cease their fighting.
I mean, the discussion started already, and many political leaders, many political parties started to raise this question. And I hope that we can convince the leaders of these groups to lay down their arms and at the end to be part of the official forces, which is under the responsibility of the government.
And with daily American strikes in Yemen a showcase for what could happen, these Iraqi groups might also consider that it is in their best interest too, and in the best interest of an already unstable region, to halt their fire.
Now, joining us on this issue from Washington is Entifad Kanbar, president and founder of the Kurdish Protection Action Committee and former spokesperson for the Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Before we dive into what this could mean, how credible, how likely would you say that these reports are?
Thank you, Bianca. It's completely not credible from my own experience because 6 of the militias have not been substantiated, nor their names are mentioned. The only person whose name is mentioned is a person whose name is Izzat al-Shabandar, who is known to have strong relationship with the IRGC and the Iranian intelligence, who also was a spy for the Bashar al-Assad intelligence. Even Jolani's government put out documents exposing he was spy for the Assad government for decades. And he's known to be a deal maker for Iran and for Iran proxies in Iraq. So I think this is a smoke screen. This is the Iranian style of trying to show one side force and the other side leniency. In fact, my sources in Baghdad tells me there has been a very high level meeting for all the militia leaders preparing for a plan to attack the United States, attack Israel and the United States, other allies in the region if Iran is attacked. So this is another Iranian sleazy attempt to mix the cards.
All right, that's very interesting. It is being reported quite widely, though. If we were to see a scenario, how would it even look like? What would that look like? These groups laying down their arms? Would there be negotiation? Would there be talks? I mean, it's not something that's simply solved.
It's a great question, Bianca. Look, we're not going to wait for them and for their mercy. There's no mercy from Iran. This is a country ruled by a demented 85-year-old person who is in love with blood and killing. But we have worked our way here in Washington for the past 2 years, and we have been finally successful to have a resolution in Congress which called Free Iraq from Iran, adopted by Congressman Wilson and Congressman Panetta, and the Republican and a Democrat. And I can show you, this is a resolution, and this has been submitted to the United States Congress, which is going to target not only militias, but financial institutions such as Al-Rafidain Bank in Iraq and the Iraqi Ministry of Finance and the Minister of Finance, Taif Sami, for allowing the Iraqi government to openly and covertly pay those militias money which is used to attack Israel, to attack Jordan, and to attack the United States.
And where, finally here, as the last question, where do you see the Iranian and Iraqi relationship standing right now with all of this going on?
Well, listen, I mean, the Biden administration was giving Iran the green light to milk Iraq, to take money from Iraq. When we have a new sheriff in town, like President Trump, he's basically going to choke Iran. His memorandum of maximum pressure on Iran was very clear. And in this memorandum, the only country he mentioned other than Iran was Iraq. And the financial institutions of Iraq, just as I said, Al-Rafidain Bank, an example, and the oil smuggling through Iraq. So I think the last resource for the United States, for Iran, is Iraq. And I think President Trump is extremely, extremely serious from talking to people very high up in his administration. He's extremely serious of putting Iran under so much pressure and let them go to their knees to stop terrorism in the Middle East, to stop wars against Israel and United States allies, and to stop their nuclear program.
All right, Intifad Kanbar, thank you so much. We really appreciate your insight this evening. Now, while in Cairo for a trilateral summit with Egypt and Jordan, French President Emmanuel Macron said Hamas has no place in Gaza's future and warned against any moves that could destabilize the region. Alex Schloss brings us the details of those meetings.
As efforts to establish a lasting ceasefire in the Gaza Strip falter, French President Emmanuel Macron is in the region in an attempt to move talks towards a breakthrough. Macron met with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Jordan's King Abdullah for a trilateral summit on regional developments.
We are deeply convinced that only a political solution will bring lasting stability and security to Gaza and the entire region. And this is the direction in which we will act, namely in the perspective of the International Conference for the Two-State Solution, which France will co-chair in a few months with Saudi Arabia, and which we want to prepare in detail with you.
Besides Qatar, Egypt has remained a key mediator between Israel and Hamas, with delegations from both sides regularly meeting with officials in Cairo. Egypt also played host to an Arab League summit in which regional states put forward an alternative plan for Gaza's future in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's controversial plan to depopulate the enclave. Aside from developments in Gaza, the three leaders also addressed the situation in Syria, maintaining the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire in Lebanon, and also the Houthi threat to Red Sea shipping, which has strained Egypt's Suez Canal economy.
We affirmed Egypt's and France's determination to restore the normal flow of ships in the Egyptian Suez Canal and to avoid forcing commercial ships to take alternative maritime routes that are longer and more expensive as a result of Houthi attacks that have targeted some of them in the Bab al-Mandab Strait due to the continuation of the war in Gaza.
As France presses for a greater diplomatic role in a region it once held immense sway, it remains to be seen if Macron's latest diplomatic blitz will result in any progress towards lasting resolutions to crises that plague the Middle East.
And joining us now on this topic is Dr. Emmanuel Navon, International Relations Lecturer at Tel Aviv University and Fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm going to start with a broader question on how important this visit is for both France and Egypt.
Well, it's important for France, for Macron, to show that he's relevant on the international scene when he's very much weakened domestically. He is heading a minority government. He's basically not able to run his own country. So he does what French presidents under the Fifth Republic like to do, which is to focus on foreign policy. Except that his foreign policy just shows weakness and delusion. Weakness because France will not be able to counter American influence and power in the region. And what he's doing is all talk. And delusion because Macron is basically visiting the region, ignoring the region's most important and most powerful country, which is Israel. To talk about the future of Gaza, meeting with the leaders of Egypt and Jordan, but without meeting Israeli leaders, is completely ridiculous. As for Egypt, Macron tried to propose some relief from the IMF, but again, at the end of the day, the only economic power in the region, the only superpower is the United States, and there's very little that France can do to help Egypt when France itself has a huge budget deficit of about 6% of GDP.
All right. Talking about that, Egypt has been trying to diversify its military aid, its weapons purchases for a long time. France has sold many weapons to Egypt. For a few years, it was even its main arms supplier. Where do the two countries stand right now on that, and what is the plan for the future, especially when we're looking at the criticism that Macron has received for sort of turning a blind eye to human rights issues in Egypt and just focusing on the positive?
Well, France is an arms supplier to many major dictatorships and human rights violators around the world, in Africa, in the Middle East, and elsewhere. So in that sense, Egypt is not an exception. But again, as you mentioned, it is true that Egypt has been trying to diversify its arms supplies, not only with France, but also with Russia. At the end of the day, Egypt depends on the United States, not only economically, but also militarily. Definitely since the signature of the Camp David Agreements 1979. And therefore, when President Trump says that Egypt won't have a choice but to accept his plan to displace the population of Gaza and to install some of the inhabitants of Gaza inside Egypt, so Egypt opposes it, but there's very little that Egypt can do to say no to America.
All right, and just finally here, a shorter answer on why this choice to focus on a visit with Egypt and with other Arab nations present and not visiting Israel on a trip to the Middle East.
Well, Macron is reverting to France's Arab policy, which was basically initiated by de Gaulle in the 60s. But Macron, as I said before, that his foreign policy shows weakness and delusion. He's still living in the 60s and the 70s, and I think he doesn't understand that the Middle East has changed, that the only way for France to be influential in the region is to cooperate with the United States, to face reality as it is, instead of trying to repeat the old scenarios of the past and old formulas that are no longer relevant to the region.
All right, and just finally, one last question here. Is there any surprise from this meeting?
No, I don't think so. I think at the end of the day, this is a typical Macron diplomacy. It's all show, it's all very theatrical. But at the end of the day, he doesn't call the shots in the region. Same thing about his recent visits to Lebanon, just because of the historical and cultural ties between France and Lebanon. It doesn't mean that France has any leeway and influence in the region. Again, Macron is theatrical. He has very little power inside France because he leads a minority government. He's led with foreign policy. But I think that at the end of the day and bottom line, his analysis on foreign policy is wrong, and he only displays the bottom line, which is the weakness of France in the world and in the region.
The weakness of France in the world and in the region. Big words. Dr. Emmanuel Navon, thank you very much for your input and your analysis this evening. Now, the UN says over 100 chemical weapons sites are still left in Syria, left behind after the fall of former President Bashar al-Assad in December, with growing concerns that they could fall into the hands of extremists and terror groups. More in this report.
Over 100 chemical weapon sites still remain in Syria, according to recent figures presented by the watchdog group, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. The number of sites and whether they are secured has remained a mystery since the toppling of the Assad government last December. Experts have expressed concerns about the possibility that militant groups, exploiting the instability caused by the regime change, could gain access to poorly secured chemical weapons storage facilities.
The secret nature of the program, the collapse of the Assad regime, and the subsequent illegal strikes conducted by Israel on December 9th, a day after the regime failed, all create additional challenges to the logistical.
In a March visit to the Global Chemical Weapons Watchdog headquarters in The Hague, Syria's foreign minister said that the government would dismantle remaining chemical weapons stores and comply with international law.
The new Syrian government that I represent here today is determined to rebuild Syria's future for a foundation of transparency, justice, cooperation with the international community. This chemical weapons program, created under the Assad era, is not our program.
Syria's interim authorities should fully renounce and suppress terrorism, exclude foreign terrorist fighters from any official roles, prevent Iran and its proxies from exploiting Syrian territory, take meaningful steps to verifiably destroy Assad's chemical weapons, assist in the recovery of U.S. and other citizens who have been disappeared in Syria, and ensure the security and freedoms of Syria's religious and ethnic minorities.
Meanwhile, scores of Kurdish fighters left two neighborhoods in Syria's northeastern city of Aleppo as part of a deal with the central government that is expanding its authority in the war-torn country. So as local authorities transfer control to the government in Damascus, President Shara is faced with the challenge of securing the stalks of the former regime, with eyes of the West keenly watching if the new Syria will be able to live up to expectations.
That's all for this edition of Middle East Now, but we'll be back tomorrow with more news and analysis from the region. But next is the rundown with a special broadcast on the meeting between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. President Donald Trump, who are, of course, meeting and discussing the war in Gaza, Iran, and the imposed tariffs. Now, after their meeting, they will be broadcasting a press conference, so stay tuned for rolling coverage right here on I-24 News.
Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are? Introducing I-24 News' brand new news website. On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the I-24 News app today.
How do you get your news? How do you know what sources to trust? And to paint a clear picture of the entire story, you need a breakdown of the constant stream of events, top stories, expert analysts, and the best journalists bringing you real voices on the ground. We're breaking it all down on The Rundown. Get the facts, stay informed, and be a voice of reason for the Middle East.
Introducing the brand new I-24 News Video On Demand app. You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions, and expert commentary, all at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the I-24 News Video On Demand app today.
Okay.
Thank you. Welcome to this special edition on I24 News. I'm Denise Levine. Thank you for joining us. Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump are meeting in the White House shortly, part of a series of hastily arranged discussions with senior U.S. officials in Washington over the next 2 days. The Israeli Prime Minister and the U.S. President are set to discuss Trump's new tariff policy, the first in-person meeting with a foreign country on the tariff issue. Their meeting will also focus on the ongoing war in the Gaza Strip, exactly 18 months since the October 7th terror onslaught and mass abduction. 59 hostages remain in Hamas terror captivity, 24 of whom are believed to be alive. Plus, on the agenda, Israel-Turkey relations, the Iranian threat, and confronting the International Criminal Court. So for the latest, let's go live to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. He joins us from the White House in Washington. Mike, a momentous day, hot on the heels of his trip to Budapest. The Israeli Prime Minister is now in D.C., meeting, of course, with the U.S. President in the White House shortly. 18 months since the war started, much on the agenda, including, of course, the burning issue of the sweeping tariffs. Tell us more.
The Prime Minister's arrival here is imminent. He'll sit down with President Trump for about an hour's time and then invite their aides in for a bilateral meeting for about 30 minutes. As you mentioned, so much on the agenda right now, including apparently the reason for this visit is the tariff policy, and it'll be interesting to see here what exactly the Prime Minister can offer up in order to entice President Trump. It's as President Trump said, we want to deal with the first people who come to us here. They'll get the better deals, but on the same token, this is the first one-on-one with a foreign leader about this particular issue here for Donald Trump, and I'm not so sure he'll want to give away the farm for nothing. I think he wants to set kind of a precedent for how he'll treat the other countries here. And so there's a positive and a negative in Prime Minister Netanyahu being the first one to talk with President Trump face-to-face about this particular issue. But the tariffs, while they may draw the headlines right now, are only one reason that Prime Minister Netanyahu has ventured out here once again. Obviously, the war in Gaza continues along here. President Trump expended so much political capital even before his inauguration to try to bring about a cessation of hostilities, to get the hostages back. But since the breakdown of that ceasefire, we've heard very little out of the White House here in terms of regaining control of the war here and getting more hostages out. So it's a chance to reset, kind of reframe the conversation here as to how to move forward. And of course, the Iran issue, President Trump wants to talk to Tehran directly. The Iranians say no, only indirect negotiations going forward here. Whether that's a deal breaker or not remains to be seen, although the Trump administration has been clear that time is not on Tehran's side right now. And of course, indirect negotiations only eat up more of that valuable time. But an opportunity here for Prime Minister Netanyahu to kind of lay down the contours of what he sees is an acceptable, if you can put it that way, a nuclear deal going forward. Of course, President Trump will only listen so much to what the Prime Minister deems acceptable or not, but at least a chance to put forward the Israeli view here of some of the red lines possibly for a revived nuclear deal and exactly the parameters that Netanyahu feels should be acceptable to the Americans, what is realistic, what will work and what will not work after having dealt with the issue for the last couple decades or so here. And adjacent to the Iranian issue is, of course, that of the Houthis, the Iranian proxy in Yemen, which continues to attack Israel. The Americans, again, have poured immense resources here into trying to tackle the Houthi problem. They've found out, like many others have, that it's a lot easier said than done here, and a chance, again, to try to get on the same page with Israel and some common cause here against the Houthi rebels in Yemen.
And as you say, so many issues, pressing issues that will be discussed in the coming hours as well. Top of mind, as you mentioned, for many Israelis, obviously, is the plight of the hostages still in captivity. 5 of those hostages are American, including Eden Alexander, one of the 24 living hostages. Talk to us about the likely pressure Steve Witkoff is likely to put on Qatar, perhaps Egypt, anyone who can make an impact and put pressure on Hamas to free the hostages in captivity for 18 months now to the day.
Netanyahu met earlier on today with Steve Witkoff in a one-on-one meeting across the street at Blair House. I don't think anybody is anticipating that Witkoff is suddenly going to put the clamps on the Qataris. He's been controversial, very much so, in his attitude toward Doha, very lenient, even praising the Qataris at several points for their efforts to mediate a hostage and a ceasefire deal here. We've heard that from other members of the Trump administration, much to the frustration of some in Israel who feel they've been much too eager to praise the Qataris as opposed to put the pressure on them. As far as Egypt goes, I think they've been sidelined to a great extent here. I think many were kind of leaning on Cairo to play more of a role in developing that vaunted plan for a day after scenario. But the last time Netanyahu was here, what was the big news that came out of that? It was his vision for Gaza. It drove the news cycle for weeks. And then the Trump administration kind of backed off that. They wanted to see what the Arab world could offer in terms of a counter proposal. But that proposal certainly didn't light the world on fire. It was chock full of some of the old failed ideas that we've seen over the last few decades or so. And the Trump administration almost rejected it out of hand. Since then, we haven't heard really anything from the White House in terms of a day after plan. But again, the ceasefire has broken down since then, so you got to lay out your priorities. I think now they're trying to get a hold once again of a ceasefire and hostage deal, and then maybe we'll turn their attention to a day after scenario here. But the Egyptians have very much been sidelined. I think that the bigger news right now is the Israelis accusing Egypt of essentially violating the peace treaty by militarizing the Sinai. I think that might be more chance of a topic of conversation here between Trump and Netanyahu today, as opposed to what the Egyptians might be able to contribute in terms of negotiating or mediating a potential revived ceasefire.
And of course, Mike, timing is always pretty fluid with trips like this in terms of meetings, press conferences, etc. What is known about what is on the cards now in the coming hours?
A very, very condensed, obviously, journey here for Prime Minister Netanyahu. As I mentioned, he met with Steve Witkoff. He's obviously meeting with President Trump. His office tells us he'll meet with Vice President Vance. Also today, there are no meetings as of now scheduled for tomorrow for Netanyahu, though, of course, that could change. He's usually high in demand here. But the big one is Trump. And, of course, that press conference coming up. We all remember what happened last time. Anytime President Trump is essentially given an open mic and encouragement from the media to speak his mind, not that he really needs it, there's going to be news generated here and so many questions for both Trump and Netanyahu. Again, keep in mind, Netanyahu is not used to those types of open press conferences. He's famously media averse, especially dealing with the Israeli media. This will be one of the few times the Israeli media has an opportunity to actually question him, but they'll do it here on American soil here. So Netanyahu was able to hold his own last time. He didn't really generate much news in and of himself. He let Trump handle that, which was actually pretty smart of him. I assume it's going to be the same this time around. Trump basks in these types of open environments with the press. Netanyahu will let him generate the news and kind of stand back and try not to do any damage per se.
Anything can happen at these press conferences in the White House, as we have seen. Whatever it is, you'll be on top of it, bringing us the latest. As always, senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim, live from the White House in Washington. For now, thank you, Mike. And now, for more, it's a pleasure to welcome to studio Avi Pazner, former Israeli ambassador to France and Italy, and the former world chairman of Keren Hayesod United Israel Appeal, and retired Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria, former deputy head of assessment in the Israeli military intelligence, and the former foreign policy advisor to Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. What a momentous time, gentlemen. Thank you very much, both of you, for being here in studio. Donald Trump saying on Air Force One, we're going to talk about trade and we're going to talk about the obvious subject. So that is quite subjective. Avi Pazner, what is the obvious subject? We know the heart of the Israeli nation is very clear right now.
It's Iran. That's the obvious. I mean, it's like a word you cannot say. The obvious. It's Iran. It's on everybody's mind. It's the elephant in the room. True. There are many other important subjects. I believe that for Donald Trump, the trade issue is a very big one. What he does with Netanyahu, what can he get, what can he give, what example he can show to other countries, etc., etc. Maybe try to calm the market, I don't know. But the main subject of this conversation is Iran. That's obvious. Look how Trump has been behaving in the last 2 months. I mean, a build-up of American forces here. You have 2 aircraft carriers. You have B-52 bombers in Diego Garcia, B-2 bombers, B-3 bombers. I mean, the whole arsenal.
All the Bs.
Yeah. I mean, you have he either is preparing to attack Iran, which I don't believe, not before he tries to pressure Iran
diplomatically
in a deal, I think. And also, all the attacks on the Houthis in the last few weeks, and the very, very hard attacks on the Houthis, those are directed more at Iran to show Iran what America can do than at the Houthis. You know, what can you do about the Houthis? There's not much to hit there. So, yes, Iran is very present. My analysis is that Trump would prefer to have an agreement with Iran. Until today, he would prefer to have an agreement with Iran, not allowing Iran to develop a nuclear arsenal. I am not sure that this is the analysis of Netanyahu.
Right.
Netanyahu maybe doesn't believe in agreements, doesn't believe that the Iranian would keep the agreement. And I think that Netanyahu is more poised for an attack, if possible, a joint attack by the US and Israel against nuclear installation in Iran. So I think we will be wiser about 2 hours from now when the 2 men emerge from their talk. But let's make no mistake, that's the centerpiece of this trip.
Jacques, your thoughts?
I would continue what Avi has begun to say about Iran. We have to be ready to look through the smoke. This is what's happening. Lots of smoke, lots of camouflage. The main issue is Iran, and the main issue concerns the implication of Netanyahu and Israel in this game, because Trump will remind Netanyahu that last time, 2020, when there was a coordination concerning an attack on Qasem Soleimani, at the last moment, Netanyahu just said, no, thank you, I'm not in. And this was taken by Trump as something that is not acceptable. And this is, I mean, you don't move a prime minister from one state to another to talk about 10% or 17% of tariff. You must move him for something very, very serious. And the thing that is serious is the preparations that the Americans are having right now concerning Iran. Now, we are at the threshold of a serious development. We have 5 weeks in front of us before reaching, if at all, an agreement with Iran, which, according to what we hear from Iran, is not going to happen. You cannot have a new nuclear agreement in 5 weeks, especially if you don't talk. So the alternative is hitting inside Iran, and Trump must take into consideration that the counterattack from Iran might hit American interests in Saudi Arabia, in all the Gulf states, and this is something very serious. And he needs Israel as an ally. And this time, this ally must not hide behind the door, but must take active participation in what the Americans are planning.
We'll take a deeper look at that Iranian threat a little bit later on in the broadcast. Of course, the war here in Gaza is 18 months into the day, 18 months since the October 7th terror onslaught by Hamas in southern Israel. And right now, for an update, we go live to correspondent Robert Swift. He joins us from the Israel-Gaza border. And Rob, Israeli airstrikes continue right now, a day after that rocket fire from Gaza towards the Ashdod area. Bring us up to speed. What is the latest?
That's right, it's been pretty busy in the skies overhead for about the last hour, hour and a half. A series of airstrikes conducted against the north or the centre of the Gaza Strip by the IDF in that time period. Prior to that, also Israeli helicopters in the sky, also using their chain guns on buildings in the north of Gaza. So quite a lot of activity here, perhaps a response by the IDF to the rockets yesterday. A barrage of 10 rockets, that being the largest barrage that Hamas has managed to fire since the resumption of hostilities here. So the IDF appearing to try and nip that escalation in the bud, so to speak.
And as we are speaking to you right now, Rob, we are getting reports according to the Wall Street Journal. We've been talking in studio now about a presser that's supposed to happen, a press conference with President Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. According to the Wall Street Journal's reporting, that presser may in fact be cancelled. We will take a deeper look at that. And right now, our producer's just telling us that, in fact, U.S. senior correspondent Mike Wagenheim, who was there at the White House, confirming as much. That certainly is a massive announcement, given the fact that all eyes right now have been on the White House, and we're waiting to hear what's going to be coming out of their discussions right now. What we do know, Rob, is many issues on the agenda in terms of their discussions, including what's happening there behind you in the Gaza Strip. Talk to us about the likely concerns right now about the future, the day after the war, and concerns, of course, around aid, not to mention the fact that right now 59 hostages remain in terror captivity inside Gaza, 24 of whom are believed to be alive. Tell us more.
Yeah, indeed. So first of all, to the hostages, where just in the last hour or so, Egypt has once again pushed forward another proposal of its own. This one is looking at a 70-day ceasefire in exchange for the release of 9 living hostages and the bodies of 3 additional hostages. Now, to that, Israel has said that they have not received anything from the Egyptians. What we are hearing about of this Egyptian proposal is through Arabic language media. To that, though, the Israeli Hostages Families Forum, they have come out with a response to it, saying that Israel should essentially not wait for the Egyptians. Israel should put forward a proposal of its own. Now, with regards to the aid, we've heard once again tonight concerns from the NGO sector, this time in the form of basically all the top UN organizations. Their heads have co-signed a letter expressing their concerns for the humanitarian situation inside the Gaza Strip. They've said that food, fuel and medicine is queuing up outside Gaza, and they're concerned that the situation inside the Strip is reaching critical point since Israel cut off the supply into the Gaza Strip right at the end of the ceasefire stage, just before hostilities resumed.
And earlier, Rob, you were talking about the fact that there have been airstrikes in the past hour. We do know that most of the hostages are being held underground in the terror tunnels of Gaza. Talk to us about the strategy in terms of the military pressure right now. How does this impact the pressure diplomatically to get some kind of a deal? How does it all work right now? It must be terrifying for those hostages if they can hear those airstrikes overhead.
Yeah, indeed. There have been returned hostages who've said that of all that they went through, one of the most scary things was the sound of jets overhead and the explosions which followed. As I say this, I now hear jets overhead once again after a pause of about 5 or 10 minutes. Now, the IDF strategy seems to be to hit Hamas as hard and as long as possible in order to exert pressure on it, while simultaneously taking ground inside the Strip. Israel's defense minister and prime minister have both spoken in the last week or so, saying that if Hamas doesn't release the hostages, then they will seize ground inside the Strip. That does appear to be aimed at pressuring Hamas in order to force them to some sort of concession. For the time being, Hamas are digging in their heels and appear not to be playing ball in that regard.
Correspondent Robert Swift, live from the Israel-Gaza border. Thank you for the update. More to come from Rob, of course, in the coming hours. Now let's go straight back to Washington because there is breaking news confirmation from the White House. Senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wackenheim joins us once again. What can you tell us, Mike?
Well, today's press conference, highly anticipated press conference with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. It's been cut from the schedule here. The press office tells us that President Trump already addressed the press earlier today, presuming they meant during his interaction with the Los Angeles Dodgers during their World Series title celebration here at the White House. Trump interacted with the press, and apparently that's enough for him today. You could read other things into it. Perhaps they don't want to, they being Trump and Netanyahu, don't want to get into the more sensitive issues that are being discussed today, especially economically, with just about every comment coming out of the White House shifting the economy one way or another. But the official line from the White House here is that Trump has already engaged with the press enough today, and so they'll still open up their bilateral meeting to the pool, which will go into the Oval Office, so the press will still have an opportunity to ask questions today. Again, Trump has been known to let them in for a half hour, an hour, so that could be a de facto press conference anyway today. But in terms of the larger presser that was supposed to take place across at the other end of the White House, that has been cut from the schedule here today.
Mike, you've been covering the White House for a very long time now. Talk to us, your analysis. How unusual is this development?
Not particularly unusual. I mean, the President Trump's schedule, any president's schedule, has been known to go through adjustments throughout the day. Keep in mind, as of at least a few minutes ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu had not arrived yet. That meeting was supposed to get underway at 1 o'clock Eastern time, 8 o'clock your time there in Tel Aviv. So they're already kind of behind schedule. And when you look at the schedule realistically, didn't make a whole lot of sense timing-wise. Only an hour for a one-on-one and then 30 minutes for the full bilateral with all the aides and the full delegations participating here. To call this trip suddenly with just a few days' notice and try to compact what apparently were very serious, urgent issues into such a short time frame, I'm not sure was realistic to begin with here. And so if you have to cancel anything, it's not going to be the meetings themselves. It's going to be everything adjacent to it, such as this grand press conference. And so not completely out of the ordinary. Of course, we can read a million things into it, but certainly far from unprecedented for President's schedule to change here at the White House throughout the day.
Well, if there are any more developments, surprise or otherwise, we will be coming back to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wackenheim, at the White House in Washington. Thank you, Mike. Now, the United States, under Donald Trump's administration, has expended much of its foreign policy energy focusing on the Middle East. Two key strands are central to how the U.S. president approaches the region, as our correspondent Robert Swift explains in this report.
The United States stunned allies and enemies alike in recent weeks as the administration of President Donald Trump laid out its global foreign policy positions. But on the Middle East, the differences between the new leadership and the Biden administration are more subtle. Two main themes characterize the Trump approach: maximum pressure and a willingness to negotiate with anyone.
I thought we had a deal, an acceptable deal. I even thought we had an approval from Hamas. Maybe that's just me getting duped.
Both of these characteristics were seen in the initial success of Steve Witkoff to bring a ceasefire to the Israel-Gaza war. Hamas publicly and the Israeli government more privately were left with little doubt about what the White House wanted.
If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East.
33 Israelis were released from Gaza, with many former hostages singling out Trump for personal praise in achieving their release.
President Trump, I am eternally grateful that you helped bring me home from captivity. I know you will not stop your efforts to secure the release of the 59 remaining hostages.
But as the momentum bled from the negotiations, including direct talks between Hamas and the White House, Trump returned to maximum pressure by threatening to expel all Gazans from their home, and laterally by green-lighting Israel's return to military operations in Gaza.
Seems like Netanyahu will not stop his war on Gaza until we are displaced, but despite the extermination, we will not migrate.
Last month, Trump appeared to gradually walk back his comments on expulsion, though Israel continues to factor it into its day-after planning, launching an agency to assist Gazans to leave voluntarily and seeking states to take them in. Elsewhere in the Middle East, a similar approach is being taken. While the US is deploying more military assets to the region, including long-range bombers, and ramping up economic pressure on Iran, it has also said it is willing to engage Tehran in direct negotiations over its nuclear ambitions.
It's better if we have direct talks. I think it goes faster and you understand the other side a lot better.
Daily US strikes against the Houthis, an escalated continuation of a Biden admin policy, can be seen as additional pressure on Iran. Following Israel's decimation of Hezbollah in the autumn and the unforeseen secondary effect of regime change in Syria, Israel has renewed freedom of movement to its north, allowing the US to take a more standoff role in both countries, while engaging diplomatically with their new governments.
We have set clear red lines from the United States. So the end of Hezbollah's reign of terror in Lebanon and around the world has started.
Interrupting that report to go right back to Washington, Benjamin Netanyahu arriving right now at the White House. You can see him waving. He is standing there next to President Donald Trump. Both seem to have similar outfits on right now. We are seeing the fist pump there from the US president, and the two gentlemen are walking inside the White House to conduct their meeting. This is breaking news. Benjamin Netanyahu arriving at the White House. He's just gone inside, about to meet with US President Donald Trump. Their joint press conference for later on in the coming hours has been cancelled, but as you can see on your screens, that meeting is going ahead as planned, and as we've been discussing, much on the agenda. The Israeli Prime Minister, the US President meeting at the White House. What a moment for the Israeli Prime Minister. Avi Pazner, former Israeli ambassador to France and Italy, still in studio, and retired Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria. Jacques, I'm coming to you. A big moment to see these two incredibly powerful, influential leaders, much at stake for both of them right now. Your sense of what is happening right now in the White House, a big moment.
Well, you know, after the niceties, I think that Trump will just attack the main course. The main course is what do we intend to do if we attack Iran? This is going to be very open, very plain. We expect you to intervene. We expect you to be with us. What is your position? It is agreed now. The fact that there will be no common press conference, it is because that they don't want to slip in their tongue and make a mistake, so that they would show what sort of business they had to treat during that meeting. And I think that this is very important, because either the American side is already contemplating the fact that Israel will not agree to most of the issues that Trump will present. The Palestinian state, the Gaza issue, Syria, Lebanon, the so-called occupation of the Gaza Strip. I mean, the Abraham Accords. What's happening? All those issues have to be discussed and thoroughly. And I think that they don't have the time for that. According to the timetable, this is a very tiny slot has been given to those discussions. And there's no other discussion for the next day, at least for now, which means that the Israeli Prime Minister must concentrate on the main issue that he came for. One is Iran. Second is the hostages. Third is the regional sphere, and certainly least and but not last are the tariffs that might be evoked by Netanyahu. This is more or less, and he has to succeed in convincing Trump that he is part of what Trump is planning, because he sees himself as a full ally and I would say completely under the hegemony of Trump in the area.
Avi, your sense, given your diplomatic experience, the significance of this meeting right now for both these leaders, a crucial time for both countries?
Yeah, let's not forget, Benita, that Trump invited Netanyahu on the spur of the moment. I mean, he did that when Netanyahu called him from Hungary together with Orban, and Trump said, come to Washington. So there is urgent business. Most of the people thought that the urgent business was the tariff issue, that Trump would make a gesture towards Netanyahu in order to calm the markets. Because we have now a situation which there is chaos around the world, and people were looking for an occasion for Trump to calm the situation, let's say to tell Netanyahu, you know what, you did a nice gesture towards the United States by eliminating the taxes. We go back to 10% instead of 70%, and that would be taken as a sign of the markets that Trump is ready to talk. But that's not the real issue, like both Jacques and I said before. The real issue is Iran. And the fact, Benita, that the press conference has been cancelled, you know, there might be more than just schedule issues here. Maybe there are differences. You know, before any such visit, there is a lot of talks between either the ambassador or a special envoy like Dermer before. And maybe there were different approaches, and maybe there were differences. So when you make a press conference, you don't make a press conference in order to underline the differences. There is a different approach. We have talked about it at length here, about Iran. There is a different approach. There might be other problems. Maybe that Trump wants to speed up negotiations about hostages and ceasefire in Gaza, and that Bibi is not enthusiastic about that. So it will be very interesting to see if there is a public part of this talk, meaning like we had with Zelensky. I don't want a repeat of Zelensky, but a similar situation, let's say, that the delegation are there and that the press is admitted and that the leaders talk about the issues without being forced to answer questions, because the press would not be allowed to ask questions.
Meanwhile, the French President Emmanuel Macron, Jordan's King Abdallah and Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the Egyptian president, are calling for the immediate return to the ceasefire in Gaza. There have been meetings in Cairo. Avi, as you well know, talk to us about the impact of world leaders pressurizing the situation in Gaza as we speak, not to mention the day after. How does it impact what's happening in the White House right now?
You know, all those leaders are important leaders, but they have a limited impact on Netanyahu. I mean, Macron more than once has called Netanyahu, also in the last few weeks, to tell him, don't do that or do that, and he has ignored. The relationship with Sisi and King Abdallah now is tense between Israel and those two leaders is tense, so that their possibility to pressure is very limited. There's one man in the world that can pressure Prime Minister Netanyahu. This is Donald Trump, and he's sitting right now with him.
And as we speak, they are talking in the White House. Of course, we wait to see the outcome of their discussions. Gentlemen, stay with us. We've got more to discuss because families of some of the hostages are calling on Benjamin Netanyahu to try to secure a deal that sees their loved ones freed from Hamas captivity in Gaza. As the Prime Minister meets with President Donald Trump right now in Washington. Let's take a listen to some of their calls.
Now, the moment of truth has come, your moment of truth. You're in the United States, and you have to sit there with President Trump and close a deal so that everyone will be released home. We are looking forward to this.
I'm here today because we've reached the feeling that there's no choice. We've reached a dead end. 59 people, including our Tamir, are in hell, and there's no end in sight. 59 people who should be the most burning issue in the state of Israel have been pushed to the sidelines. We are angry, we are shouting, and it seems that nothing is happening. Our responses are running out, but we will not give up. We are calling from here to the Prime Minister. First, release the hostages, all of them, in one stage. That is the most important issue.
We are here near the house of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. We call upon you, Netanyahu, Trump, please, it's been a year and a half. Bring them all home now. Netanyahu, you are free to go as you please. You can travel to the United States. Our brothers are not free. Let my people go.
Let my people go. That urgent, passionate appeal just days before the festival of Passover. And now for more, we welcome to studio Yotam Cohen, brother of hostage Nimrod Cohen. We so appreciate you being here in studio. We cannot imagine what you and your family are going through. It's 18 months to the day since the 7th of October, the terror rampage, the mass abduction, and your brother Nimrod was taken alive from a tank and has been held in dire conditions at the hands of evil right now inside Gaza. How are you doing? How are you feeling at this moment?
It's another holiday when we as a family are celebrating it without my brother anymore. And I think it's something that I think the entire people of Israel are, especially this holiday, which is the holiday of freedom, Chag HaCherut, especially this, the contradiction between the so-called freedom and the fact that my brother, which was one of the soldiers protecting the border, protecting the civilian that day, and is still in captivity under terrible conditions. And we have to live in this parallel universe in which the entirety of Israel and the entirety of the Jewish people are celebrating the holiday of freedom, and we as a family have to deal with this lack of freedom of my brother.
It is quite clear that the entire nation will be marking Passover coming up in the coming days. It's the second time the festival will have been marked since this war started, and those tears, the salty tears, are there across the nation right now. I'm wondering what it feels like to hear these testimonies from freed hostages who have come back with accounts of the conditions inside Gaza. What does it feel like for you to understand that, to know that hostages have been held in cages in the dark tunnels of Gaza?
I mean, it was important for us as a family to know what Nimrod is going through in these days. On the one hand, to know the truth and to know what exactly is happening. But on the other hand, these testimonies are horrific. Just the thought that my brother is going through unimaginable suffer is terrible for me. But it was important for us to know the truth. It was important for us to spread the truth, to let people know what really is happening, and to call for them. Look what is happening. Come with us. Come support us in this struggle and help us, Nimrod, so he won't have to go through these tortures in which he's suffering right now. So he won't have to do it ever again. But sadly, this is still the situation. One thing to know that these testimonies came to us when the ceasefire was taking place. Right now, when Israel resumed the campaign in Gaza and resumed the military pressure, these conditions have worsened. Very much so. The rations, the water, the treatment from the captors are all being deteriorated very extremely because Israel has returned to war.
And we also know the psychological pressure and trauma that is being exerted on the hostages inside Gaza as we speak. When we talk about current events unfolding right now, we know, according to my colleague who is covering the field right now, Israeli airstrikes continue inside the Gaza Strip, that military pressure that you spoke about. At the same time, we also know right now President Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, are meeting in the White House. There's a diplomatic effort, there are discussions at least, there's military pressure. What is your take on efforts to get the hostages home right now?
We've been saying for about a year that the only solution to bring back the hostages is by a diplomatic solution, to agreeing for the terms to end the war and return all the now 59 hostages, from which 24 are still alive. We've been saying this for a year. At the start of the war, we also believed that military pressure is the solution. But just to know that 41 hostages out of the 251 hostages, which is one out of 6 hostages was killed as a result of the military pressure, both direct and indirect. And we think that the only way is a diplomatic solution. The fact that there are two ways right now, both the diplomatic and the military, could be good, but those strikes could now be killing hostages and could have killed hostages in the past 2 weeks. And this is the thing we're very much afraid of, that Nimrod will be killed as a result of these strikes.
And exacerbating all the fears is the fact that if there were to be a deal, because Nimrod is a soldier, he would be last on the list to be freed. And when was the last confirmation that you had the proof of life, according to the testimonies that you heard from freed hostages?
It was about a month and a half ago, exactly during the so-called first phase of the hostage deal. And the fact that Nimrod is a soldier and going to be one of the last in the living hostage category is the exact reason why we've been advocating to release all the hostage in one phase, not being divided into multiple phases, because otherwise Nimrod will be left there for a couple of months or maybe a year or a couple of years. And that's why we're calling to agree to the terms to end the war and get all the hostage, including Nimrod, back to Israel.
If right now you could be a fly on the wall, if you could give a message to Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump speaking in the White House right now, what would you say?
I would say that the right decision and the just decision is to get all the hostages and to pay those prices. And the vast majority of Israelis and Jewish people around the world support this notion of ending the war in Gaza and finding a diplomatic solution to eradicate Hamas and return all the hostages. And I plead to them, both to our Prime Minister and the American President, to listen to those calls and listen to those prayers and do the right thing and the hard thing to do and get us hostage in a deal.
Give us a sense of the connection, the support between the families of hostages. We have spoken to so many relatives of hostages throughout this war. There is a sense, as you are articulating, that everyone will keep on fighting until the last hostage gets back home.
I mean, you can see this every single week in the rally in the hostage square on Tel Aviv. You can see every single week returning hostages or so-called survivors are coming and calling and being interviewed and flying abroad to meet President Trump, to meet other elected officials. And this is very, very important to us to feel like we're not forgotten, that they know, their survivors know, there are still people suffering what they've been through. And so they are fighting to continue with us. And for us as a family, seeing this support of the returning hostages and the support of the tens of thousands of people coming and protesting with us every single week, this is what gives us the strength to go on.
Yotam Cohen, strength to you and your entire family, the whole nation, hoping for good news. We so appreciate you being here in studio. Please stay with us. We do have more to discuss because we were talking about diplomatic efforts. Here's an update out of Cairo, a trilateral summit with France, Jordan and Egypt. French President Emmanuel Macron saying Hamas has no place in Gaza's future, warning against any moves that could destabilize the region. Alex Schloss has the details in this report.
As efforts to establish a lasting ceasefire in the Gaza Strip falter, French President Emmanuel Macron is in the region in an attempt to move talks towards a breakthrough. Macron met with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Jordan's King Abdullah for a trilateral summit on regional developments.
We are deeply convinced that only a political solution will bring lasting stability and security to Gaza and the entire region. And this is the direction in which we will act, namely, in the perspective of the International Conference for the Two-State Solution, which France will co-chair in a few months with Saudi Arabia, and which we want to prepare in detail with you.
Besides Qatar, Egypt has remained a key mediator between Israel and Hamas, with delegations from both sides regularly meeting with officials in Cairo. Egypt also played host to an Arab League summit in which regional states put forward an alternative plan for Gaza's future in response to U.S. President Donald Trump's controversial plan to depopulate the enclave. Aside from developments in Gaza, the three leaders also addressed the situation in Syria, maintaining the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire in Lebanon, and also the Houthi threat to Red Sea shipping, which has strained Egypt's Suez Canal economy.
We affirmed Egypt's and France's determination to restore the normal flow of ships in the Egyptian Suez Canal and to avoid forcing commercial ships to take alternative maritime routes that are longer and more expensive as a result of Houthi attacks that have targeted some of them in the Bab al-Mandab Strait due to the continuation of the war in Gaza.
As France presses for a greater diplomatic role in a region it once held immense sway, it remains to be seen if Macron's latest diplomatic blitz will result in any progress towards lasting resolutions to crises that plague the Middle East.
And still in studio, Avi Pazner, former Israeli ambassador to France and Italy, retired Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria, former deputy head of assessment in the Israeli military intelligence, and Yotam Cohen, brother of Israeli soldier and hostage Nimrod Cohen. Gentlemen, there's so many developments right now, but I want to hone in on what is happening right now in Cairo. Jacques, we're hearing these leaders, they have ideas, they have strong views about what's happening right now and the day after. Your sense?
Yeah, the big question is what is their impact? As Avi said, I would say next to zero, at least on Israeli politics. And what is the most interesting thing for France in this visit is to sell weapons to Egypt, to sell more Rafale aircraft and more ships to Egypt. This is the main goal of the visit. And certainly, this is surrounded by ideas of, political settlement, about the France's stance concerning the Palestinian issue, concerning Gaza. What is interesting is the fact that he says that there's no future for Hamas in the day after in Gaza, which is a consensus that is accepted also by most Arab leaders. So there's nothing new in that. So this is where we stand right now, and I don't think that the most interesting thing right now is happening in Washington and not in Cairo.
Emmanuel Macron is strongly opposed to any displacement or annexation in Gaza and the West Bank, so the discussions may well be continuing in Washington as we speak. But Avi, talk to us about the impact right now of messages like this. At the same time, we know there's a proposal coming out of Egypt in terms of some kind of ceasefire that would see the release of 8 living hostages. What do you make of all of this right now as the spotlight shines very clearly in D.C.?
I hope that the talks on hostages will continue and will bear fruits. I think my heart goes out to Yotam as he was speaking and to all the other families, and I do hope that this meeting between Netanyahu and Trump, with the participation of Witkoff, by the way, with the mediator, will bring a new impetus to the negotiation and to the release of the hostages. It is possible. It is possible. Like we achieved an agreement 3 months ago, we can achieve another agreement. But what is certain, it is not the triumvirate with meeting in Cairo, Macron, Sisi, and Abdallah, who are going to help in that. Again, it's up to the United States to find a solution on this particular problem, and I believe it is possible. And if Egypt is serious about this proposal for a ceasefire, and is serious about pressuring Hamas, because this is what Egypt can do. This is what Egypt can do, is pressure Hamas, then maybe we can have some progress on this very touchy, important issue of the hostages.
Maybe one remark about Egypt. There were reports lately in the Israeli press and all over the world that Egypt is behaving badly in Sinai against all the agreement that we had on with the peace agreement, and has changed the deployment of forces and so. And it seems that the source of it is in Qatar. The source of these reports seems to come from Qatar, which has paid some lobbyists in order just to, in fact, to accuse Egypt of doing nothing, and in fact of putting Qatar at the front and saying Qatar is the one that is responsible, the one that is achieving all those goals with the hostages. Whereas we know that were it not the pressure of Egypt, I think that Hamas would not agree to anything.
So much has been made about the so-called Trump effect, and I'm wondering, as someone who has a loved one, a brother, held in terror captivity for all this time, politics is not what families need to be involved in, and my heart goes out to you for the roller coaster of all these headlines and how they change in these discussions. It must be so difficult to hear all these varying, conflicting reports. But is there a sense that things are different out of Washington since January, from your perspective?
First of all, we found ourselves plunged into politics since the 7th of October in this foreign field, and have to navigate inside it to get results. I think there is a change ever since President Trump has entered office. Simply the fact that the deal was signed on the 20th of January, on the very first day of the inauguration, is not a coincidence. There is a very much a prominent pressure by President Trump. But I think it's very sad that me as an Israeli citizen have to look up to a foreign leader to get my brother, which is an Israeli soldier, an Israeli citizen, back from captivity. And the fact that I feel, in my subjective feeling, that the Israeli government is not doing enough, and many of the families feel so, and the fact that even the hostages in captivity, with the messages from Hamas, are addressing President Trump and not our Prime Minister Netanyahu, and the families of the hostages and the returning hostages, all addressing President Trump in their pleas. I think it's a very sad reality, but this is the only way we feel things are going to change.
And as you say, families thrust into the political spotlight, something one would never imagine being part of your normal daily routine. It really is such a difficult and heartbreaking situation.
What is their guilt to be condemned for captivity for 18 months on nothing? This is incredible. This is insane. When you look at what's happening, even this weekend, our Prime Minister is having a nice time with his wife in Hungary, whereas he's having a great dinner, whereas our hostages doesn't even get a pita or half a pita in the tunnels.
President Donald Trump said, if the hostages were not returned, all hell would break loose. Jacques Nerier, from your military background, your perspective, what did you envisage that to mean? What could it mean down the line? Could it make a difference for Yotam and other families waiting for good news?
It's not good news for the families, because what Trump means is that just finish this war. And with it, just enter in Gaza, take over Gaza, be the one that is, that rules Gaza, and finish with that. This means that our hostages might be facing a death penalty because of that activity. But this is what Trump needs. He wants this problem to be put aside because he has other things to take care of, and mainly the Abraham Accords. And in the meantime, Hamas stands inside, blocking all the American efforts because of their presence.
Avi, parting thoughts on exactly that. What is it going to take to get 59 hostages, 24 of whom are believed to be alive, back home where they belong as soon as possible?
You have to resume serious negotiations. There is no other way. Accompanied by military pressure, of course, but limited military pressure, not the kind of all hell should break loose. Limited pressure, accompanied by an effort to negotiate. And I am a little bit concerned that Trump now is turning his attention away, not only from Gaza, from a lot of issues, and concentrating on this tariff craziness, which can bring the world into recession. And I pray that this meeting between Netanyahu and Trump will again refocus the attention on the problem of the hostages. Now coming together with the Egyptian initiative, maybe we can further some kind of progress. This is my hope, at least.
We remember very well the famous the famous sentence that Joe Biden said to our prime minister. Okay, I mean, don't, you know,
one word.
In one word. So I believe that this can be the same with Trump. Don't try even to do that. And I think that this is a different approach, and I think that the pressure that Trump would put on the ground would be much heavier on Netanyahu, and maybe force him to accept to end this war and to reach an agreement with Hamas about letting, I mean, all hostages back, I mean, the dead and the alive, of course.
The nation waiting for good news. Retired Colonel Dr. Jacques Neria, former Ambassador Avi Pazner, and Yotam Cohen, thank you all so much for being here. A very difficult day and a momentous day. We wait to see what comes out of meetings right now in the White House. And that is a wrap for this special edition. I'm Benita Levine. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned.
Dance, music, and magic immerse you in the story of Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem, an unforgettable musical where the past and present meet. Welcome to the heart of the most sought-after city in the world. A unique experience only at Kikar HaMusika. Reserve now at thisisjerusalem.co.il.
Introducing the brand new i24 News Video On Demand app. You'll have instant access to all our programs, reports, in-depth discussions, and expert commentary, all at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News Video On Demand app today. The 7th of October set in motion a chain of events. Today, Israel's enemies are severely weakened, but not defeated, and the balance of power is shifting. This region never rests. And for its own survival, Israel needs to keep its finger on the pulse. If you want to better understand, if you want to hear voices you won't hear elsewhere, then tune in daily to Middle East Now on i24 News. Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are? Introducing i24 News' brand new news website. On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it. So what are you waiting for? Download the i24 News app today.
Welcome to Jewish World Weekly on I-24 News. I'm Emily Francis. Each week, we're focusing on stories, issues, and personalities of Jewish interests here in Israel, as well as throughout the diaspora, or also called the global Jewish community. And we start with our top 5 items in the Jewish world, presented by our very own Nicole Zedek. Hi, Nicole.
Thanks, Emily. Here are the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. The Israeli National Security Council warns Iranian agents may try and target Jewish and Israeli tourists over Passover. This comes as people linked with Iranian proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamist terror groups Al-Qaeda and ISIS have seen a spike in activity around Europe. But the National Security Council actually singled out Australia and Canada as they've seen an uptick in anti-Semitic incidents in recent months. 3 Uzbek citizens have been sentenced to death for the murder of Chabad Rabbi Tzvi Kogan in the UAE. The Moldovan Israeli emissary was abducted in Dubai last November, and his body was found days later. Israeli security officials claim the attackers were sent by Iran, but this hasn't been confirmed quite yet. Jewish residents of Djerba, a small island off the coast of Tunisia, have protested the arrest of a man who was sentenced to 7 years in jail. Social media footage shows members of Djerba's 2,000-strong Jewish population trying to break into a police station after rumors spread that this arrest was related to the Israel-Hamas war. The Tunisian Jewish Community Authority denies this, saying it was in relation to a car-burning incident several years ago. Randy Fine, a strong Trump backer, won the race for congressman in Florida's 6th district after a special election was called since the previous congressman, Mike Waltz, resigned to become national security advisor. It was a tense and surprisingly close campaign where Fine, who calls himself the Hebrew Hammer, beat his Democrat opponent Josh Weil with 56% of the vote. And finally, London's Tate Art Gallery has returned a rare 17th century painting back to the descendants of its original owners after it was looted by the Nazis in the 1940s. The Henry Gibbs painting from 1654, Aeneas and his family fleeing burning Troy, was brought by the gallery from Belgium in the 1990s. It originally belonged to Belgian art collector Samuel Hartveld, who fled to the United States in 1940 to avoid Nazi persecution. Well, now the painting is back in the hands of his great-grandchildren. Those are the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. Back to you, Emily.
He's a comedian and actor turned Jewish activist and, of course, longtime podcast host who is not afraid to ruffle a few feathers with his rants. Michael Rapaport has been to Israel several times since October 7th to offer his support and much more. And this time he was front and center in Hostages Square.
Even when I'm not here, a piece of my heart lives here. This fight for the hostages has become deeply personal. And over the last 18 months, I've had the honor of meeting and getting to know some of the families whose lives have been shattered and destroyed by this war. And it has been impossible for me not to see my own family in them. When I met the family of Shlomo, Mansour, and Oded Lifshitz, I saw my grandfather in them. When I met and spoke to Orlevy's brother Michael, I saw my own brother. When Rachel and John told me about their son Hirsch, I couldn't imagine my own young adult sons.
Wow, and we're so happy to have him here in the studio. Michael, you are so amazing. Listen, it just brings tears to my eyes hearing your compassion and to be here, even with a hoarse voice, as we just heard. The fact that you have been not only fighting against the narrative, but being supportive of the hostage families is so important. So what was it like being there this time, given that we've started the war again and we still have many that are still there?
I mean, I don't think it was any different. I think people are, the families and the whole country are exhausted, concerned, deeply, deeply concerned, and confused and demoralized. And, you know, I feel like you know, to use like a sports analogy, like we get to the 1 yard line and then somehow we're back at the, you know, our own 30-yard line, and then we get to the 20-yard line and then somehow, you know, it just keeps pushing and pulling and pushing
and
and
the
pulling.
sacks keep happening and the penalties.
And, you know, my little part in this, I never imagined that 540 days they'd still have hostages. But I just can't imagine or think of not supporting, standing up, fighting. And I'm aware now of my voice in regard to this because there's so few voices, you know, from Jews in the diaspora, Jews in Hollywood, Jews in show business that have been supporting. And I will not stop fighting on behalf of the 59 hostages and the sovereignty of Israel. It's of the utmost importance to me, and the safety and the respect of Jews in New York and all around the country. But I'm a New Yorker, you know, to see what, you know, has been going on in New York is so mind-boggling.
It's one of those things because I, too, as you know, lived in New York a long time, and it was never a thing. I mean, New York is a melting pot. No one is afraid of walking the streets and taking the subway. So the fact that it has changed so drastically is... for you to see stuff, do you say something now when you see people like... I
haven't seen that in real life yet. Now, I don't go to these rallies, but I haven't had any... The thing that I see the most, that resonated with me the most, is the ripping down of the posters. And I know that doesn't hurt anybody, but it hurts my soul throughout this period of time in Manhattan to see... You can name one. You know, the Bibas family being ripped down, I think, is the most shocking because it's a baby and a little kid. You know, it's an entire family. So that one, but you know, whether it's, I mean, I can name, I've seen it with my own eyes. I take photographs of it because it's so disrespectful and it's so hateful. It doesn't hurt physically, and it doesn't, you know, on the list of things that those people are going through, that's the bottom, but it's just sort of like it hurts your heart.
It's such a deep pain. It's not like, you know, an arm, you break an arm, it heals in a few weeks. This is just an ongoing trauma in and of itself. But for you to be advocating, I mean, have you had a lot of pushback? I mean, do you get threats, and are these something that like scares you or concerns you?
I mean, I get threats on social media, but I think if you don't get threats on social media, you're not doing social media right.
Yeah.
So I feel like, you know, I've always gotten threats, you know, whether it was, you know, stuff about politics. I've always gotten threats on social media. Those don't concern me. You know, I've had, you know, comedy shows, protests. That doesn't concern me. You know, there's been, how do I say it? There's been some issues in terms of getting jobs as an actor.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really showing.
Yes. However, I don't have the slightest bit of regret. There was no choice. Well, if you do this, this is going to happen, or if you do this, this won't happen. Being supportive of Jews, being supportive of Israel, being supportive of our people was not a choice. It was it is very natural and organic to me.
Tell me, you mentioned in the beginning, you know, when you were, you know, on the stage in Hostage Square, that you see these families, you see the Lipschitz families and whatnot. It reminds you of your grandfather and your brother. Did you know your grandfather?
Yes.
And tell us a bit about him.
I mean, I knew all my grandparents. You know, they passed away when I was young, but. You know, these are, you know, New York Jews, Russian Jews. You know, they were definitely New Yorkers. And, you know, whether it's the family of Shlomo Mansour, who, you know, I have his mustache.
Yeah.
You know, or, you know, hearing, like I said, you know, John and Rachel talk about their son, or Michael Levy talk about his brother, or I mean, the endless conversations and moments that I've had. I think, as a Jewish man, as a Jewish person, it came very clear to me that no matter what you support, what you think, what you post, if you had been here on October 7th, you too could have been murdered, killed, raped, or kidnapped. All these things became very clear to me. So when you see the family of Omir Nutra, you see the family of Omer Shemtov, when you see the family of Eden Alexander, these are New Yorkers in New Jersey. These are people, they sound just like I do. Ruby Chen, his son Itai Chen. That just, all these experiences just, they just resonate with me.
And
the Americans really.
That's the thing in the States. How disappointing is it for you? I've experienced that, to see people that you've worked with or know, knowing that they're not
let me tell
with
you,
us. I imagine that also feels like a betrayal.
The show business, actors, actresses, musicians, part of it is, again, it doesn't affect me on a daily basis, except for I have to work with these people, and there's so many people that I have lost respect for, and there's so many people that present themselves as empathetic. There's so many people that as sympathetic, as worldly, as compassionate, and as they like to read, and they like to read about poetry, and they like to read about the world, and they're completely full of shit. They're completely full of shit. And some of them are Jewish, and some of them are not Jewish. And it's been an existential career thing. It's not existential to my life, but it's been like a, you sort of start to go like, these are my peers? Not all of them.
Well, and it seems like a lot is a lie.
There's a lie.
There's a lie based in this.
And there is a lie, and it's frustrating because of the presentation that they show themselves. They care about animals, and they cry about pigs and cows. Cool. They cry about this cause and that cause, but you haven't in 540 something days educated yourself that you have, you take the time to sign a letter for this documentary filmmaker who was probably doing another documentary, who was allegedly throwing rocks at the IDF. If it had been another Academy Award winner from this past year throwing rocks at a New York City policeman, there wouldn't be no uproar. Be like, what the is this guy doing? Throwing rocks at the police or LAPD. But because they just run, so that part of it has been, that part of it for me personally has been something that I'm trying to wrangle with.
Yeah, I think we all are, even a year and a half later. It's like a whole new matrix reality, whatever you want to call it. Michael, it's so amazing to see you, and thank you for continuing to be a voice and for coming here when you're in Israel and making it a priority, no matter what kind of backlash you face.
I appreciate,
much appreciated.
I'm not going anywhere.
An interesting story from a place that we don't often hear much about, not only when it comes to Jewish history, but let alone discrimination towards a Jewish community post-October 7th. We're talking about Croatia, home to 8 synagogues, a population of around 5,000 people. Yet in the wake of the October 7th massacre and war against Hamas, the Croatian government has yet to act on pleas from the Jewish community to ensure their security. We are now joined via Zoom by Rabbi Pinchas Zaklos of the Menorah Chabad community of Croatia. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, and thank you for the interview.
Yes. So listen, we know that, most of the world has been experiencing in the wake of October 7th, of course, ranging from protest to physical violence. But first, let's start with the Jewish community. Who knew there was so much history? What makes it unique prior to what happened on October 7th?
So the Jewish community in Croatia exists many, many years, even before the Second World War. It was 3 communities since 150 years ago. It was Sephardic, Ashkenazic, and Neologic community. Unfortunately, in the Holocaust, many Jews was killed. And after the Holocaust, many years, the community didn't have a rabbi. So what is make it unique is that even the 3rd generation doesn't know almost nothing about Judaism. So when we came here, we need to start from the beginning, from Aleph base, from the minimum knowledge about Judaism. We need to start to teach the community. And thank God, I could say we did a lot of good job, and we have, Baruch Hashem, thank God, a nice community.
Well, that's a testament to, of course, all of your hard work. You said being there for over 20 years. So let's talk about obviously what has happened, why you feel so threatened, not safe, insecure. What has the reaction been prior to, of course, writing this letter? Trying to get more security protection. But what has happened there specifically? Okay, so let me just give you a short introduction. We are here for the last 20 years. We feel usually safe, but since the 7th of October, many people feel not safe in the city, especially in the city of Zagreb. We have a protest every few months, and we have people on the street that they are saying bad word about Jewish people. And we built a beautiful building, beautiful community, and there are some people, they don't want to come to the community because we don't have security. And people feel some kind of, since the 7th of October, they feel some kind of fear. So according to law, if we become a religious community, we have the right to get security. But so we decide to apply. We went through all the process. All what should be done to be able to get the status of the religious community. And it was almost 2 years ago. And unfortunately, we still didn't got this solution. Means that all this time we don't have security. Wow. So this, you said 2 years ago. So this started even before October 7th. You were asking for this kind of recognition. We start already before the October 7th. Already people feel not comfortable. But, and we went to government, we turned to government, we asked, please help us. And he says, I'm sorry, we don't have enough people, we cannot help you. So we decide that the only way is to do it is to go through the Croatian law and to do all the process. And we did it. We're still waiting for solution. So and this is the reason. Silence says a lot. I guess there's a lot of noise in silence. So also this letter, you're trying to bring it in a very professional, hopeful way of, hey, we're a group, we like security, and trying to get to the attention of President Trump. Is there any chance that will happen? What is it that you would hope in an ideal world the president would recognize? We realized that without helping of outside of the country, we will not put pressure on the government, we will not be able to get any result. So I was speaking with Duvi Unig from the organization. It's called Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce. He's a very nice guy, and he decided to help us to speak with the government. And we sent a very emotional letter to the government of Trump. And few minister and few senators already involved, and we hopefully that the pressure, and they understand our needs. They understand that Jewish people cannot have any problem to come to the synagogue and to keep Jewish life, and hopefully that this pressure on the Croatian government will make the results. All right, we'll be able to continue living a normal Jewish life. Right. Well, thank you very much, Rabbi Zaklos, and of course, keep up the good work. And it sounds like you've built quite a nice community. She's a British-Israeli playwright, screenwriter, comedian, director, actress, teacher, Renaissance woman, and now she's taken on the challenge of quite a lifetime and a career, especially during such challenging times. Hadar Galron is performing on stage in an autobiographical monodrama about Dr. Joseph Mengele, known as the Angel of Death, but this time with a twist. Take a look at a clip of Whistle.
Everyone knows that 6 million Jews were massacred in the Holocaust. But how many of the survivors actually lived? How many of the survivors could ever dare to love again? How many of the survivors were able to love their children? And how many of those children who grew up without love knew how to love? Tammy is just one of these children. Her mother was Dr. Mengele's secretary. Can Tammy overcome her childhood, shaded by the horrors of the Holocaust, and let herself live and love as she dreams?
And we're very happy to have Hadar Galron here in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you.
And very brave. I mean, brave enough to get on stage in a one-woman, one-act play, let alone so many different variations of characters in such a intense topic.
Yes.
So what made you decide you wanted to do this?
Well, actually, I began just with writing, with helping Yaakov Buchan, who is a book author, writer of many, many books. He's written like 19 books. And his mother was Mengele's secretary. And when he came to me and told me that, I just said, okay, so we need to write about her. He said, no, I've written about her. We need to write about the second generation. I want people to know that we are transparent children, that we were just born to be like to be like sponges for the pain of our parents. Nobody saw us. My mother didn't even think she could get pregnant, and that actually is kind of how the play begins.
Wow, yeah.
Where she says to her mom, she says, my mom, yeah, you know, the whole thing, I try to do it with as much humor as possible, although it is a drama. But, you know, it begins with people love, they say people love success stories, but really they prefer disasters, especially other people's disasters. And, you know, my disaster began even before I was born. My mother, from a really young age, she told me, who even thought I could get pregnant after everything I went through over there? So you must.
You heard that your whole life?
No, this is him, not me.
This is him. I was like, wait, your mother too? Yeah.
So she says, you must have been really happy, Mom. I was devastated. It was already the end of the war.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
This is a true story. It was the end of the war. We were kept in some camp, Ich weiß, in Austria. This is where I met your father. Both of us, we knew that we have nobody left from before the war. We stuck to each other like a bandage to a wound. This is how I got pregnant.
What a nice feeling. Yes. But still, I mean, amazing that he, you know, was able to handle it enough to be able to write.
Well,
maybe writing was
70.
Maybe writing was also his outlet. But explain. Yes. So his mother literally was the secretary to Mengele.
Yes, and you know, since I've been going around the world with this show, and I found out in many different audiences that Mengele had a Jewish Masua, that he had another Jewish secretary, that he had a Jewish woman to do his manicure, pedicure, and he had a Jewish doctor. And, you know, a doctor who just finished medical studies, and after the war, he did not work one day as a doctor, of course. But I met his daughter. So I've been meeting these second generations in Canada, in Israel, in the Czech Republic, in Hungary, in, you know, just all places. Yeah. As well as meeting many, many of the second generation. Because the second generation is not only what we think of the second generation. Can you imagine I came to perform in Vienna, and I say I, but it's we. I went, first of all, when we went back to Austria, we were performing in front of an audience of second generation Jewish and non-Jews. And so at the end of the play, someone comes up to me and says, I was very touched by your play. I am also second generation. My father was a Wehrmacht soldier. And I'm like, wow, okay.
Wow.
You know, my first thing is, what do you mean you're not second generation? But then he tells me his father was 19 years old when his two legs were decapitated, and he lost his youth. And you think of these young children, you know, they sometimes don't know.
Right.
That they're on the wrong side.
Let's, because we're out of time. I want to hear. So you're performing, as we know, you've performed in Tel Aviv, and you're also on the way to
Tel Aviv.
Right, but you are performing in Tel Aviv, and you are right. But let's talk about the performance that you're going to be doing in Germany.
In Germany, in Weimar. First of all, it's the first time in Germany. For me, this is amazing to go to Germany with this play. And actually, the play in German, the translation, won a prize last week.
Wow.
Translated by Matthias Neumann, and so it's even before the plays arrived there. The festival that we will be performing at is a festival for 80 years to Auschwitz.
Wow.
So it's going to be like the closing play of the whole festival.
Talking about coming full circle, really incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Emily.
Now we want to end end on a sweet and incredible story that happened right here in the land of Israel. What was supposed to be a day of family fun turned out to be much more for 3-year-old Ziv Nitzan when she discovered a rare archaeological find. Take a look.
From north to south, Israel is famously full of historical beauty and archaeological findings. Something that became very clear for 3.5-year-old Ziv Nitzan and her family when they took a trip to Tel Azika near Beit Shemesh, and the little girl discovered a rare archaeological artifact on the way.
אנחנו הלכנו בשביל כאן. זיו התכופפה בין כל 70,000 אבנים שהיו לידה, והרימה אבן, ואז היא שפשפה את החול, וראתה שמשהו שונה באבן.
A Canaanite scarab seal dating back approximately 3,800 years to the Middle Bronze Age.
זיו, זאתי שמצאה את החרפושית בתל הזיקה, ממש על השביל הולכי רגל, ויצרו קשר עם רשות העתיקות, והנה אנחנו מעניקים להם תעודה, מודים מקרב לב, ותמשיכו כך.
This scarab amulet traces its origin to ancient Egypt, where beetles were seen as sacred symbols, embodying new life.
אנחנו מאוניברסיטת תל אביב חופרים את האתר הזה כבר כמעט 15 שנה. לכן הממצא הזה של חרפושית מצטרף להמון ממצאים מצריים וממצאים שנעשו כמו ממצאים מצריים. זה שמישהו שמטייל פה בתל ומוצא את זה, מעביר את זה לרשות העתיקות, והשיתוף פעולה של האוניברסיטה עם רשות העתיקות, זה חלק מכל המחקר והעבודה שנעשית פה כבר הרבה מאוד שנים.
The piece will be featured in a special Passover exhibit in Jerusalem, along with other ancient artifacts.
Thank you so much for watching Jewish World Weekly on I-24 News. We sure hope you enjoyed it. If you want to catch us on previous episodes or to watch online, please go to the I-24 News YouTube channel where we post each episode of Jewish World Weekly. I'm Emily Francis. Thanks again for watching, and shalom from Tel Aviv.
Bad posture. The ever-increasing hours we spend sitting, working, and even while trying to relax at home is twisting our vertebrae out of alignment and creating strain and pain on muscles, ligaments, and joints. A scientifically designed spine and back support device that uses precision biometric technology to perfectly align the back and spine for all-day comfort and support, creating perfect posture for your back every time you sit down. Now features extra-wide acupressure comfort pads as well as an extended height back panel for even more support, making it perfect for all body types. Also features a precision wing design that perfectly cradles your back and spine with amazing ergonomic support that leaves you feeling refreshed and energized even after sitting all day.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. Booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
Welcome to the I-24 News National Security Podcast, in partnership with INSS, the Institute for National Security Studies. I'm your host, Nicole Zedek. Each week, we bring you in-depth discussions with expert analysts on some of the most pressing national security challenges facing Israel today. So, let's get started. Today, we're turning our focus to the Gaza Strip, where Israel finds itself at a critical strategic crossroads. After more than a year of fighting, Hamas is still in control. And Israel is facing tough choices about how exactly to move forward. Should it pursue a full military occupation or work to establish a moderate Palestinian authority? Or maybe work with U.S. President Donald Trump's vision and encourage voluntary migration? Or does Israel just continue managing the conflict as it is? Each option has significant risks and potential consequences, not just for Israel, but really for the entire region. In this episode, we'll examine the strategic alternatives Israel has when it comes to Gaza. We'll break down the military, political, and humanitarian considerations, as well as the role that Arab states might play in shaping the future of the Strip. Well, joining me to analyze these questions and much more is Dr. Ofer Guterman, a senior researcher at the INSS. Ofer, great to have you with us on the podcast today. Thanks for being with us. There's a lot that we're going to unpack during this episode, but first, I think it's important that we address the core problem, where we stand right now, because with this renewed operations that we're seeing the IDF take in the Gaza Strip, it does seem there is this balancing act. On the one hand, the desire to completely eliminate Hamas, but this right now comes with the cost of more of this long-term military occupation, or at least a prolonged conflict. So what is this balancing act that we're seeing?
So I think it touches the basic dilemma that Israel has since the beginning of the war. So on the one hand, you want to destroy completely Hamas, military and in all other aspects. And on the other hand, there are the costs of doing it. And so how do you do it? This is on the one hand. And also you have, nowadays, you have the, let's say, the implications of the Trump administration, which I think is, let's say, playing both sides. And it's not really clear what his real agenda is. So does he really give Israel the green light to take Gaza completely? I'm not sure of it. So I think this is a consideration that Israel has to take alongside the other, let's say, internal considerations, which one of them is, of course, what the occupation of Gaza would mean to the hostages, and what would it take in its cost in its economic toll. And also, we know it's not a secret that the reserves are tired. Not all of them, but there is this fatigue that needs to be taken into considerations. So a lot of considerations that Israel has to take.
There's this fatigue even inside Israeli society. In fact, the INSS, they recently published this week the Swords of Iron survey. It seems the public is divided on resuming to war or not. 57% say they support resuming combat. And so we're not seeing this equal divide, but still, it's a conflicting issue for even Israeli society.
Yeah, I believe that this fatigue you're talking among the Israeli society is not just a matter of, let's say, we are tired of fighting. It's also a matter of how the fighting is is being implemented, because politically the divisions came back, the political conflict has started yet again. And so people are asking, what are the real goals behind the agenda that the Israeli government is taking? So it's harder for a democratic society to support war where you are not really sure what are the goals, and does political or even personal considerations are contaminating the decision-making behind this decision to resume the fighting.
And you talk about even the U.S. influence. You briefly touched on this, what the Trump administration wants to see, because we have seen a vocal statement and policy coming from the Trump administration that Hamas needs to be completely eliminated. But on the other hand, the Trump administration wants to see economic success in the Middle East, and that does not come with a prolonged conflict in Gaza. And so we are seeing this quote-unquote balancing act when it comes to even the United States and Washington's views on how to continue with this conflict.
Right. So I think, first of all, you're hearing different voices from the Trump administration, and the voices are changing over time. So it's hard to really say what is the agenda there. But I think that I agree that they want to see Hamas completely annihilated. But I think we heard different tones from Witkoff, the president's envoy to the region, that we want to see them militarily annihilated. So, and also even saying that basically they can see Hamas becoming part of a new
some sort of technocratic government perhaps.
If and when they disarm themselves. So if they are disarmed, then I think that if I understand correctly what Witkoff said, then is aiming for that purpose, so not annihilating them completely. And also, at the beginning, we heard that Trump declared it himself, that he wants this voluntary migration. But then we heard, again, different tones. And I think that there's the Arab pressure there, that especially from the Gulf states, but not only, on the Trump administration, not to go with this plan and seek other alternatives.
You talk about exactly all of these alternatives, these different approaches on how to handle Gaza right now. And so, Ofer, that's what I want us to do right now. I'm going to lay out some 4 options, really, that it seems maybe Israel, the Arab states, these international entities might be able to take when it comes to tackling the Gaza Strip. And you're going to break it down for us, starting with military occupation, because even today, as we are recording this episode of the podcast, we heard from Defense Minister Israel Katz that there is an expansion of the IDF operation inside the Gaza Strip. And with that, the goal right now of this expanded operation is to seize extensive territory. That's a quote, to add to Israel's security areas. So right now, military occupation from Israel's standpoint seems the option that Israel might be taking.
So again, I don't know if Israel really means it, or if Israel does mean it, will it go all the way? Because, as I said, there are those constraints we talked about. But if we talk about this option as, a whole alternative, then the basic point here is that we have to destroy Hamas. And there is no one else that can do the job. Arab states, with their suggestion, we'll talk about it in a few minutes, they don't really suggest a plan how to do it. I don't see the UN does it or the US does it, so it's only in the hands of Israel to do it. So that's the, let's say, the rationale behind this alternative, saying we need to take to occupy all of Gaza, and it will take a few years to destroy as much as we can of the infrastructures, the arms, the weapons, neutralize all the Hamas activists, and so on and so forth. So this is the rationale, but the question is it actionable? Is it doable? Can we achieve this goal?
And what will it take?
And what will it take? So I think that it's reasonable to assume that in a few months and then in a few years of cutting the grass of the Hamas and all the other terror organizations in Gaza, we can succeed in a good way destroying them, but not completely. And so it's like the former Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, said that you can plow the field as much as you want, but if you don't grow something else in the place of the seeds, then
because of the ideology.
Because of the ideology, but not only ideology. I mean, Hamas is not an external force that occupied Gaza. It's rooted deep down. I mean, is working on not just ideology, but all of its infrastructures. He comes from Gaza. So that's why you can't root it out without planting something in it instead. So that's why I think you can only succeed to a certain extent, but if you don't complete it with a political solution, then you can maybe put Hamas aside for some time, but it will grow again.
Those roots are still there.
Because the roots are still there, and you can't really pull them out if you are not planting something instead.
So that brings me to another option then when we're talking about these alternatives for the Gaza Strip, that being the Palestinian Authority or even some sort of moderate version of the Palestinian Authority. Is this a capable force of coming into Gaza and being that next seed, so to say, to be planted in the Gaza Strip and actually take control of the territory?
So I would divide it into two. I mean, there's the general suggestion of this political solution, a more moderate administration, Palestinian administration instead of Hamas, not necessarily the Palestinian Authority. Even the Egyptians' proposal is not putting the PA, the Palestinian Authority, there right at the first stage, but start with local bureaucrats, local Palestinian Gazans from Gaza, of course with the help of Arab states and the US and supervision of Israel. But after 6 months, they want the PA to come. And I think that this is not good enough because the PA, Israel demands that the PA would take some reforms, some measures to fix itself with everything that has to do with the de-radicalization of, for example, of all its systems, mainly the education system and so on. It needs to recognize Israel as the home of the Jewish people. It has to take some steps in order for us to look at it as a good partner that we can trust to take control over Gaza. This is one thing. But even if we are talking about not the PA, but talking about locals, local Palestinians, still it's not good enough because if you are not demilitarizing Gaza and you are not disarming Hamas, then what's the prospects of such an administration? So in a few months or years, or at the moment we will pull out, then Hamas will take over.
We're already seeing something very interesting even this week inside Gaza when you talk about these different clans, these different armed civilian groups inside Gaza that aren't Hamas, that aren't the PIJ. They're still now taking and fighting back against Hamas. There was an incident this week where some of these members actually publicly executed a Hamas operative who had killed one of the clan members who was waiting in line to buy a bag of flour. And so we're seeing some armed resistance, but is that a good alternative for Israel? Does this truly show the situation inside Gaza?
So, of course, this is not an alternative, but it does show you that Hamas can be pulled out, that it doesn't receive the 100% support of the Gazan population. So that's the half glass full. But of course, on the other side, they are not, peace activists and
certainly not good neighbors to Israel.
And not good neighbors. So you need something else. You need, and we do know that that Gaza still has a few thousands bureaucrats, many of them ex-Fatah members, and they can be the jumpstart to this new administration. But again, the prospects are very low if the Gaza Strip is not demilitarized.
So with that, I want to now touch on Donald Trump's proposal. Then we talked about military occupation of Israel. We talked about some sort of a technocratic Gazan governance. What about voluntary migration? What would it actually take to make some of the Palestinians who want to leave to go find a new life somewhere outside of the Gaza Strip? How likely and feasible is that?
So I think it's likely to assume, and there are some polls and experts that say that many of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip would be happy to leave Gaza in the current state.
If given the chance.
Yeah. So, and in Israeli perspective, in Israeli eyes, looking at it, putting morals aside, of course, you can see the good side. I mean, what you can earn from Gaza Strip being without the Palestinians that makes all this trouble to Israel all these years. But you will have to ask yourself, what are the prospects, again, of this alternative also? So I will start with the moral issue, because I think it's also an issue. I mean, I think that the Jewish state should ask itself, is it okay, is it not just remembering our past, but looking forward to the future? Is it good for us to encourage this kind of alternative of actually helping a whole of the population migrate from what they believe is their land?
Voluntary displacement. It comes with a major ethical dilemma.
So we call it voluntarily, but still you have to ask yourself, if you destroyed most of Gaza and if you actively encourage them to go out, is it really voluntarily? I believe that many in the world would see that as ethnic cleansing and not as, and it's not, I mean, regardless of what Israelis would believe. So we have this moral issue, which is an issue, but otherwise also you have other considerations. So let's say that, not a few, but half of the population want to go out. Still, you remain with 1 million Palestinians. So let's say even 2/3 want to go out. Still, you are with more than 500,000 Palestinians. So it really doesn't touch the problem in its roots and solve the strategic problem of Gaza. And also, I think that there are a lot of other considerations that I think reduce the likelihood of this alternative, because at the end of the day, I'm not sure that the Trump administration would give the green light to go all the way with this alternative, and we already see some signs because of the pressure from the Arab states that they have their leverages on the Trump administration.
If no one's going to accept them and take them in, this isn't a viable solution.
Right. Also, we didn't see any country. Of course, Arab states, they see it as sentencing themselves for destruction if they agree to receive Palestinians. Other Muslim countries have already said they won't agree to that. I don't see Europe today in its state and all the migration problem receiving Palestinians, 1 million, 2 million Palestinians. I think also Donald Trump won't agree to 2 million Palestinians to migrate to the US. So what are you left with? Perhaps there is one or two, some failed states in Africa that would agree, but will the Palestinians on their own voluntarily will migrate there? I don't think so. So I think that the likelihood of this alternative is very low. And the bottom line is that even if we take morals aside and we trying to chase this strategy, at best it would be a complementary strategy. It can't be the main strategy.
They have to have these other approaches. Now, there is one more option also on the table, and that's just continuing with the status quo. Exactly what we're seeing right now, and these in-and-out operations to try and put a lid on the problem without truly tackling the problem. But this has been Israel's main objective for the past several years, and we saw it really come to light on October 7th. Continuing with the status quo, is this an option that Israel is likely to take?
I don't think that it's an option that Israel would willingly take, but I think it's a default option that can realistically manifest itself and will be the ultimate reality if the Israeli government would continue with, let's say, bad policy and wrong strategies. So in the case that Israel will still chase the voluntarily migration as the main strategy, as the government has stated. This is their new strategy for the day after in the Gaza Strip. And if I'm right in saying that the likelihood of this happening is very low, then you're still in this stalemate, and nothing really happens, and you don't change the things on.
So then, what is your recommendation? We've talked about military occupation. We've talked about voluntary migration. We've talked about even some sort of a Palestinian authority or Palestinian governance, or just continuing where we are. Ofer, what is the way that Israel should, if they have all of these options on the table, actually move forward?
So I think before we are saying what is the right strategy, I think we need to reset our thinking, the way we think on Gaza. And for too long now, we are chasing fantasies. And we have to switch it and not mix fantasies and dreams with real strategies. The way, serious states are doing their decision-making and craft their strategies. And we have a problem here. I think that if we make this switch, the real strategy is the same strategy that we had to take a year and a half ago, at the beginning of the war, which is combining the two arms. So both the military option or military fist and the political, let's say, fist or option. You have to combine it together in a synergy when the one hand is helping the other. So you're pressing Hamas all the time in order to destroy it, to kill the activists, to take all their weapons and so on and so forth. And this will buy you the time and the option to grow a new alternative, a moderate alternative. And at the same time, if you are chasing this new political alternative in Gaza, a more moderate one, it will help the military operations also, because you will give an horizon for the Gazans, for the Arab states, for everybody to pull together to help achieve this goal.
Otherwise, there's this vacuum in the Gaza Strip, and Hamas remains the default to fill that vacuum.
Exactly.
So it seems there are a lot of dilemmas still going forward then, Ofer.
Right, and I think also another point here is that we have to stop thinking unilaterally. We have to look at it as a multi-level problem that we have to enlarge the scope, the envelope. We need to do it together.
It's not just Israel and Gaza. It's the Arab states. It's the Abraham Accords. It's the United States. This is a global issue, and at least a regional issue at that needs all of these players involved.
Right, exactly. I think we achieved the point, we Israelis and the Palestinians achieved the point where we are no longer can sort our problems, just the two of us. We need others to help us, and those are mainly the Arab states. And at the same time, if we want to chase, enlarging the Abraham Accords and normalization with Saudi Arabia and integration in the region, we can't do it without solving the Palestinian issue. So we have to combine it together, and again, it's combining the two hands: the regional solution and settling the Palestinian issue together.
We need to combine these forces. Now, Ofer, we've been going very big picture here. We only have a few minutes left. I'm going to ask a quick rapid fire round, some quick questions, and you're going to give me the first answer that comes to your mind, if you can. All things that we've talked about, and the first one just being, what is the most realistic solution in your opinion? Is it military occupation, voluntary migration, or Palestinian Authority control?
I think the solution would be, at the end of the day, most likely that at the far future, it might be the Palestinian Authority, but it would have to be Palestinian administration with Israeli control over the security in Gaza.
And this is still in line with that question then. Out of those three feasible solutions, which is the best outcome for Israel?
The best outcome would be to annihilate Hamas capabilities and option to be a spoiler for resolving our issues with the Palestinian people and with the region and solving the Israeli-Arab conflict for good.
That is a big picture right there and a good
possible.
goal.
It seems far, but it is possible.
Well, off that note then, can Israel truly balance this military pressure with the political initiative, or will one always outweigh the other?
It can. Israel has to agree to things that it's not agreeing today, but also Arab states would have to take more steps than they take today because they are not really keen on tackling the real issues of how to reform the PA and how to press Hamas to disarm itself and so on. So both sides, I mean the Arab states and Israel, needs to come to terms to a middle ground on this issue, but it is possible this way, I think.
I think that's a message I want us to end on then, this message of hope and working together in the region, because it's not just an Israel-Palestinian problem, as you just mentioned. It truly is a regional problem that if all of these sides can work together, hopefully there is some sort of a way towards some sort of solution and peace here in the region. Let's hope for that.
Yeah, let's hope for that.
Dr. Ofer Guterman, it's great to have you on the podcast and gain your insight into the many options that are conflicting and all come with their own consequences, but we'll actually have to see exactly what does lead in the future. Thanks for being with us on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
That's all we have for this latest edition. If you do want to catch up on any of our past episodes, just search National Security Podcast on Spotify, and you can find us all there. Thanks for listening.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. Booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
Now, more than ever, we are all joining forces at the front lines and the home front in medicine, technology, research and development with hope. And together strengthen the Negev. Ben Gurion University, the University of the Negev.
The 7th of October set in motion a chain of events. Today, Israel's enemies are severely weakened, but not defeated, and the balance of power is shifting. This region never rests. And for its own survival, Israel needs to keep its finger on the pulse. If you want to better understand, if you want to hear voices you won't hear elsewhere, then tune in daily to Middle East Now on I24 News.
watching I-24 News live from Tel Aviv this hour. I'm David Matlin. Thanks for joining us here. We are running special coverage as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's in Washington at the White House as we speak after he arrived last night ahead of a series of quickly arranged meetings here with President Trump and key members of his cabinet. There are clearly a lot of issues on the table for these two leaders. The ongoing hostage crisis, the war in Gaza, the new U.S. tariffs on Israel and the rest of the world, Turkey's growing hostility and presence in Syria, but it's likely the looming, multifaceted Iranian nuclear programs that are casting the biggest shadow and likely at the top of the agenda today. Now, to find out more, we go directly to the White House, where our senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim has been standing by, covering the quick movements here of the Prime Minister as he flew over overnight from Hungary, where he had other meetings. Mike, what can you tell us about the schedule? What are they up to right now?
Well, it's slightly delayed start to this meeting here today as President Trump was on the line with a number of world leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, King Abdullah of Jordan, and President Sisi of Egypt, putting together some coordination, some planning here for Gaza, specifically when it comes to trying to reinstate the ceasefire and hostage deal. And, at least for the Arab leaders, the more important thing right now is getting humanitarian aid back flowing into Gaza, which Israeli officials said yesterday they are beginning to coordinate on as well. So the meeting was delayed at the outset, and it's dragged right along here, so much so that they canceled a press conference that was scheduled for, well, actually, it was already scheduled. Yes, it was supposed to happen
we've
a
been
half
on
hour ago.
Standby here to cover
President
yes.
Trump and but that was canceled a long time ago. I think everybody realized, listen, there's a whole lot of things to discuss. There's no reason you would drag Prime Minister Netanyahu here from Hungary when he was on his way back to Israel just to sit down for 20 minutes and hold a press conference. So they're talking about it here at length, the issues at hand, not only dealing with the tariffs that have been instituted by the Trump administration on countries worldwide. Netanyahu agreed to be essentially the guinea pig here, the first one to meet with Trump here to try to allay and alleviate some of the punishment being felt by Israeli businesses right now vis-a-vis the tariffs that were implemented here, as he and Trump try to come to some arrangement here to try to cut down on those tariffs. What Netanyahu is offering up in the air at the moment, maybe some cutbacks on some taxes on imports into Israel, maybe opening up the markets a little bit more to American companies, markets that have been cut off to foreign competition for quite some time. But the larger issue, certainly so, is Iran and what to do here in terms of the negotiations that the Trump administration has offered to go into. Trump wants to have direct talks with the Iranians on the possibility of reviving a nuclear accord. Tehran has said that's a no-go. They want indirect negotiations. If that, Trump has said, listen, time isn't exactly on your side here. You got a couple months to figure things out, and that's it. And indirect negotiations, obviously, are more time-consuming than direct talks. So as far as Netanyahu goes, he wants to lay out essentially what he feels are Israel's red lines, what he feels the parameters of those talks should be. And, of course, Netanyahu has dealt with the Iran nuclear issue like no other world leader, so he's hoping Trump will take those considerations into account, although it's quite obvious dealing with Trump that he'll have the last word on things. There was a meeting yesterday with Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, talking about tariffs, meeting earlier on today with Steve Witkoff, the special presidential envoy for the Middle East, to talk obviously more about Gaza, the hostage deal, the ceasefire, and there'll be a meeting later on today as well, at least on the docket, with Vice President J.D. Vance. So, again, talks are ongoing. We understood from a press official earlier on that even at, what was it, at 1:50 Eastern time, that's 8:50 your time there, they were just sitting down to lunch, Trump and Netanyahu, in their respective delegations. So, again, we're still waiting here. They're supposed to open up the Oval Office to the press pool. That was supposed to happen over an hour ago now. The press pool is still sitting in the briefing room here behind us, waiting for their opportunity to go in and hear from President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Yeah, we see some of the imagery that's come out of these sit down here for the lunch by major delegations on either side of this table. All the heavy hitters, the main cabinet people, the Prime Minister's delegation. So all the right people, all the important members of this cabinet at the table right now. It clearly looks like there's a lot of business to discuss. And again, We don't know much, right, Mike, beyond the meeting with Vice President Vance and a few of the press items you're talking about. We don't know much else about Netanyahu's itinerary at this point?
We talked to his spokesperson about an hour and a half ago. He told us the meeting with J.D. Vance is today. There's no other meetings planned. Netanyahu is scheduled to leave tomorrow. There was some talk earlier that maybe he would meet with some influential Congress members. But according to his spokesperson, we talked to him directly. There's nothing like that on the agenda. There's no a trip over to the State Department or the Capitol or anything like that. It's J.D. Vance later on today, and nothing else has been put on the docket beyond that.
Certainly an interesting moment. They have all of us here on the edge of our seats. Mike on standby at the White House. Thanks so far for the updates, Mike. We're going to bring him back to studio for now. And we're joined in the studio by our correspondents. I'll go down the row here. Diplomatic correspondent Blue Sladin, Ambassador Jenny Ayalon, and correspondent Nicole Zedek. Good to have all of you with me in the studio here for covering, again, sort of flying by the seat of our pants here as we cover this unscripted, unscheduled visit into the White House right now. Ambassador, I'll come to you first. You've seen a lot of prime ministerial visits to the White House over the decades come and go here. This one seemingly came out of nowhere. Looks like these two jumped right into business. How does this all look to you so far? This type of interaction, this, having it all come together so quickly. You see the people around that table at lunch. They obviously have a lot of important things to discuss. What do you anticipate here? What does this look like?
Very unique, very unprecedented, almost like an impromptu meeting, which
top level
has some good things and bad things. First of all, by definition, any meeting between the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of the United States is very important, certainly given all the background that we have today in the region. But let me start maybe with the commercial issues, with the tariffs, which may not be the most important thing on the agenda, but this was
the freshest one, the newest one to be.
But this was supposedly this was a trigger for the meeting. But on this issue, I think they can come to terms. By the way, from this vantage point of being in Washington during very complex negotiations on economic issues between Israel and the United States, I can tell you these things are solvable. I was quite dismayed that Israel did not bring up the argument. We have a very good argument because, yes, the balance of trade really goes to our favor. But this is only one side of the coin. There is another side, which is not less important, which is the balance of investments. Israeli investments in the United States are 10 times more than American investments here. And this is because of all our pensions, and most of the money goes there. Now, this money, goes right into the American economy, creates thousands, 10,000s of jobs. So this should have been a mitigating argument for actually taking out the tariffs. Maybe they still will. Not bringing it down from 17 to 10, but from 17 to 0. Now, this all could be just a segue to the real issue, which is Iran. And here I'm afraid, and I hope I'm wrong, that this could be a honey trap by Trump, inviting Bibi and actually foisting on him this political negotiations with Iran.
To try to bring him around to this idea.
Right.
That
So he would ask Bibi not to interfere, to support it. And the challenge for Bibi would be, that the Iranians are the masters of negotiations. They will, procrastinate. They will do everything in cheating and all that. And here, I think if Bibi would, and probably he will put it on the table, if you do negotiate, make sure there is a limited time, a very short limited time. Make sure that this time, all the mistakes from last time will be corrected. For instance, the centrifuges. You cannot leave the centrifuges there, albeit in some airtight boxes. It has to be shipped out.
The great complaints over the JCPOA, these sunset clauses, some of which would have already expired.
Sunset clauses. Another issue, of course, is this unlimited access for the international inspectors. You cannot have the veto power that Iran can decide where they go and when. And lastly, I would say all the ballistic missile program. Countries do not spend billions of dollars on ballistic missile programs just to put a small warhead. It's only for nuclear warhead, and this also should be part and parcel of the agreement and should be away with.
Sounds like already planning for agreements here. Again, this is, I know, a lot of.
And this is before we talk about Gaza, before we talk about Turkey in Russia. There is a full agenda here.
Yemen.
I will say one thing on the Iran issue, just as Danny's stating, it doesn't seem that Netanyahu, Israel wants to see these talks spread out. It doesn't seem that the Trump administration wants to either. The Deputy Special Envoy to the Middle East, Morgan Ortagus, was just in Lebanon, in Beirut, to talk about...
She's been talking tough. Yeah.
She's been talking tough. She had a sit-down interview, in fact, with Al Arabia, and they just aired pieces of that day, and it talked about that rhetoric towards Iran, and she said, we're not going to let Iran stretch this out. There's going to be a timeline, and we won't engage in indirect negotiations, because these indirect negotiations that Iran continues to push for, with Oman being more of the back channel ways that the Biden administration, that they kind of got sucked into in the past.
Just cutting in to let our viewers know, Nicole, what's on the screen here. These are some of the video feed we're getting from the White House right now. So again, some activity taking place. Looks like they're starting to move the press at least around closer. We may have something to tune into here in just a moment.
Yeah, just a quick update. The meeting between Trump and Netanyahu alone already started about a couple of minutes ago. And just to what you were talking about, the ultimatum didn't come only from the Americans. It is, we're halfway. They talked about 2 months. We're already 1 month into the, after Trump sent that letter to but also the Europeans are on board, because they are saying that until June, there should be also an agreement between all the, the Western nations and Iran. And it's very important because of the deadline in October, the snapback sanctions that they cannot activate after October. So it's very important also for the Europeans and the Americans.
What do we know, Blair, about this conversation from President Macron right now that apparently was happening as we were looking to jump on air here? We're delaying things perhaps with Prime Minister Netanyahu. What's Macron's main issue right now that he's calling the U.S. president while sitting with Sisi and Abdallah? Is it all about Gaza, or are they talking Iran? What do we know?
Yeah, well, Macron is visiting, of course, Egypt, and he had a call with the King of Jordan, Abdullah, and President Sisi, with Donald Trump just before his meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And it's very important. If we listen to what Macron has said before that phone call, he talked about the fact that Hamas cannot rule Gaza in the future. So that's something that the French are saying as well. But they're, of course, very concerned with the fact that the aid entry is blocked to the Gaza enclave, and they want that to resume. And, of course, the Iranian issue. Macron is also saying that we have our concerns for the nuclear program that Iran runs, and that should be sorted as well. Again, the Europeans as well, the French, the English, and the Germans have their own ultimatum until June. There should be also an agreement between these nations and the Iranians as well.
And again, looking at this live imagery coming from the White House here, some activity. Again, we're on standby for any updates, whether it's the photo op we wait for, and I've seen some action around before, or actually press conference. But we know the leaders were having lunch just a short time ago, over this last hour at least. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, who's at the White House right now. And again, this coming with very little planning or advance notice here. Prime Minister Netanyahu essentially diverting his trip from Hungary straight, well, not straight, to the U.S. We can detail exactly the route he took to get there. It certainly wasn't a straight one. But here he is at the White House today. And now we see the press gathering. Nicole, on this and on the atmosphere we see at the White House here, there was I'd call it a press frenzy the last time Netanyahu paid a visit here. And so I believe there's a high level of anticipation right now from all those who are there to cover it, to see just what emerges from this meeting. But significantly, the moment the Prime Minister is in, and we spoke about this earlier on air, about the circuitous route, I guess you could say, that he took to get there, flying from Hungary. He didn't take a direct path.
This
What's weighing on the Prime Minister?
Meeting that came from a successful trip in Netanyahu and Israel's terms, when it came from Hungary announcing their withdrawal from the International Criminal Court after these arrest warrants were issued against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Israel Katz. And when you talk about this press frenzy, we're getting a live glimpse of just how chaotic it can be.
We'll jump in there in a moment.
Everyone is waiting. But just for Netanyahu to even get there, following the successful visit with the Hungarian Prime Minister, there's still fear of these other countries implementing the ICC arrest warrants. They had to fly the Wing of Zion plane an extra 250 miles, circumventing the route to get to Washington, so that they didn't fly over the airspace of the Netherlands, Ireland, or Iceland, 3 countries that they're worried if there had to be some sort of an emergency landing, and the Wing of Zion had to touch down in one of these
places. Here we go,
Nicole,
looking at our viewers here. This is looking over the shoulders of the press corps here in the Oval Office already. So we see the two leaders sitting in their respective chairs, flanked on either side by their top members of the cabinet. See Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Rubio, of course, there. You see Tzachi Hanegbi on the Israeli side. There's Ron Dermer. Of course, these are some of the key figures in terms of the strategic diplomacy of the Prime Minister of Israel as well. So, getting down to business, perhaps we'll listen in here in a moment. Here's the ready to talk. And we've seen again, not too long ago, some real action and then quote-worthy statements. Let's listen in.
Prime Minister of Israel, and we had lunch together, we had meetings together, along with very capable. And I think we've come up to some pretty good solutions and conclusions. And we'll be working a little bit after this, and then I assume you're going back home. This is a quick stop, in and out. But we appreciate you being here, and we are a friend of Israel, as you know. I would say that I'm by far the best president that Israel has ever even thought of seeing. And it's an honor to be so, and I can't. But we appreciate you being here, and we are a friend of Israel, as you know. I would say that I'm by far the best president that Israel has ever even thought of seeing. And it's an honor to be so, and to be so thought of. And many friends in Israel, they are not in an easy area. It doesn't go easy, but we are helping them. And likewise, they've been helping us very much. And so we'll see how it all works out. But we had great discussions today, I think, on the obvious subject of Iran, and also the less obvious subject with respect to Israel, and that's trade. And I think the Prime Minister is going to tell you a little bit about trade and what they're doing for the United States. So I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you very much. And
thank you.
Benjamin, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Don. Thank you. Mr. President, I want to first thank you for inviting me again to the White House. You've been a remarkable friend of the State of Israel. You stand by us. You're standing with us. You are a great, great champion of our alliance. And you actually do the things that you say you do. And I think that people respect that enormously. I certainly do, and the people of Israel do. And I think the Jewish people do as well. We just saw your representative in the Department of Justice fighting anti-Semitism, standing up for Israel in international forums. I just want you to know from the heart, it's deeply, deeply appreciated. As you said, we had the opportunity to talk today about many subjects. First, if I can mention tariffs, it's a subject of some interest today. I can tell you that I said to the President a very simple thing. We will eliminate the trade deficit with the United States. We intend to do it very quickly. We think it's the right thing to do. And we're going to also eliminate trade barriers, a variety of trade barriers that have been put up unnecessarily. And I think Israel can serve as a model for many countries who ought to do the same. I recognize the position of the United States. It says, you know, we're allowing other countries to put tariffs on us, but we don't put tariffs on them. And, you know, I'm a free trade champion, and free trade has to be fair trade. And I think that's basically the position that you have put forward, Mr. President. We are going to eliminate the tariffs, and rapidly. I had the opportunity to speak to Secretary Lutnick yesterday. We talked about how we could effect this quickly, and I hope to bring a solution very quickly. We're not talking about intentions. We're not talking about you know, just words. We're talking about results. And those results are going to come. That's the first.
Thank you very much. It's very nice.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. President, what about the hostages here?
Well,
what about the hostages?
Let him finish.
Didn't finish.
Okay.
Didn't begin. We spoke about not only the hostages, but about Gaza. The hostages obviously is a human story of just unbearable agony. I speak to the families. I spoke to them yesterday. Spoke to another one when I was in Hungary before I came here. I speak to them every day. They're in agony. The hostages are in agony, and we want to get them all out. Steve Witkoff, who's President Trump's very able representative, helped us get a deal that got 25 out. We're working now on another deal that we hope will succeed. And we're committed to getting all the hostages out, but also eliminating the evil tyranny of Hamas in Gaza and enabling the people of Gaza to freely make a choice to go wherever they want. I mean, they should have that choice. And the president put forward a vision, a bold vision, which we discussed as well, including the countries that might be amenable and are amenable to accepting Palestinians of their free choice if they choose to go there. And I think that's the second thing that we discussed. But the hostages came right on top. We also discussed the situation in Syria. We've had neighborly relations with Turkey that have deteriorated, and we don't want to see Syria being used by anyone, including Turkey, as a base for attack in Israel. Turkey is a country that has a great relationship with the United States. The president has a relationship with the leader of Turkey. We discussed how we can avoid this conflict in a variety of ways, and I think we can't have a better interlocutor than the President of the United States for this purpose. And of course, we also discussed Iran. Look, we're both united in the goal that Iran does not ever get nuclear weapons. If it could be done diplomatically in a full way, the way it was done in Libya, I think that would be a good thing. But whatever happens, we have to make sure that Iran does not have nuclear weapons. That's the end of my speech.
Mr. President, we're having direct talks with. Wait. We're having direct talks with Iran, and they've started. It'll go on Saturday. We have a very big meeting, and we'll see what can happen. And I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious. And the obvious is not something that I want to be involved with, or frankly, that Israel wants to be involved with if they can avoid it. So we're going to see if we can avoid it. But it's getting to be very dangerous territory. And hopefully those talks will be successful. And I think it would be in Iran's best interest if they are successful. We hope that's going to happen. And we had just a lot of good talks on a lot of things. I appreciate very much what you said about the tariffs. We've been ripped off and taken advantage of by many countries over the years, and can't do it anymore. Just can't do it anymore. Can't be the stupid people anymore. And it's all because of the people that sat in the seat right here. Not your seat, but this seat. They allowed things to happen to our country that they shouldn't have allowed to happen on trade and other things, many other things. I mean, look at what's happened with our last president, where he allowed millions of people to come into our country with an open border. Who would want an open border? How stupid is that? But he allowed millions and millions of people, and of the millions, and I think it was 21 million people, but let's say 3 of them were serious criminals, serious murderers and drug dealers and gang members and people from jails. All the jails emptied out right into our country, right along the open border on Mexico, generally the Mexico. They came in from Canada too, by the way, a lot. But generally speaking on the southern border. And what a shame it is that we are now working very hard to get them out, get the criminals out, get the murderers out, the drug dealers, the mentally insane, get them out. They dropped the mentally insane in our country too. And this was all done by the Biden administration. It's a disgrace that we have to work so hard. And then we have judges that try and protect these people, but they didn't protect us when the people were being let in. But to get them out is never easy with these people. So I think we're doing a great job. The border is the best it's ever been. It's even as strong as it was. I had a great, solid border. I think it might even be tougher right now and stronger. So people are coming into our country, but they're coming in legally. We have a legal process, and we have that moving along properly, because we need people to come into our country, but we want people that can love our country and cherish our country. So that's where we are. And with that, any questions?
Mr. President, reaction to the markets today, and would you be open to a pause in tariffs to allow for negotiations?
Well, we're not looking at that. We have many, many countries that are coming to negotiate deals with us, and they're going to be fair deals. And in certain cases, they're going to be paying substantial tariffs. There'll be fair deals. As you know, I spoke this morning with the Prime Minister of Japan, and we had a very good conversation. They're coming. And I said, one thing, you're going to have to open up your country, because we sold no cars, like 0 cars in Japan, and they sold millions of cars into our country. They don't really take our agriculture, a little bit of it just to keep us slightly happy, but they don't take what they're supposed to be taking. So we have a great relationship with Japan. We're going to keep it that way, but they're coming in to meet, and other countries are coming in. With China, as you know, against my statement, they put a 34% tariff on above what their ridiculous tariffs were already. And I said, if that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on. So they've gone for years. They've become a rich country because of people, again, that were in the White House that allowed hundreds of billions of dollars a year that make on us on trade, and it shouldn't be that way. And I have a great relationship with President Xi. I hope it's going to stay that way. I have great respect for China, but they can't do this with just, we're going to have one shot at this, and no other president's going to do this, what I'm doing. And I'll tell you what, it's an honor to do it, because we have been just destroyed, what they've done to our system. You know, we have $36 trillion of debt for a reason. And the reason is that people allowed it to get that way. So we'll be talking to China. We'll be talking to a lot of different countries. And I think, you know, if we can make a really fair deal and a good deal for the United States, not a good deal for others. This is America first. It's now America first. And we didn't put America first. We put America last. The people that were in the Oval Office put America last, and we're not going to stand for it.
Mr. President, represent the U.S. in the talks with Iran.
Two questions. Do you expect any of these deals to be made before April 9th? And secondly, there have been some mixed messages from your administration. You're talking about negotiations, and yet others in your administration are saying that these tariffs are actually permanent. What is that? What's that?
Well, they can both be true. There can be permanent tariffs, and there can also be negotiations, because there are things that we need beyond tariffs. We need open borders. You know, we almost had a deal with China where we're going to open up China. It was almost done. Some of you remember it during my first term, and it was very disappointing. We ended up making a great deal. $50 billion worth of product was sold. $50 billion. You'd like that in Israel. And I made that deal, but it wasn't the deal that I wanted. It was the deal that I wanted was that, plus they were going to open up China so that our companies could go into China and compete with other countries and China for the, you know, for a large number of people. And at the very end, that deal was terminated, and we went to a piece of the deal. And so there are a lot of things outside of tariffs, but tariffs are very important. But there are a lot of things like opening up countries that were totally closed. China's essentially a closed country. In fact, it is a closed country. And what they do is they charge tariffs so that if you sell cars or if you sell anything, nobody's going to buy it because the price is out of control. But that's true with a lot of other countries also. So we're going to get fair deals and good deals with every country. And if we don't, we're going to have nothing to do with them. They're not going to be allowed to participate in the United States.
Mr. President, many of time. Mr. President, many of thank you for the chance. Many of Palestinian Americans who voted for you and not for Biden because you've promised them to end the war in Gaza.
Very honored by that vote too.
The war is still going on, and there's no hostage deal. Do you have any update on that?
Well, I'd like to see the war stop, and I think the war will stop at some point that won't be in the too distant future. Right now we have a problem with hostages. We're trying to get the hostages out. We got quite a few of them out, but it's a long process. It shouldn't be that long. We have a big problem that we've done. I think I'll ask Pete to maybe talk about it for a second, because a lot of people are asking. The Houthis, we've been very tough and very successful militarily. we've really damaged them badly. These were people shooting down ships and other things, by the way, flying objects like airplanes. And we've put a major hurt on the Houthis, which nobody's been able to do. We've really hit them hard, and they know it, and they don't know what to do. And it's every night, night after night. And we've gotten many of their leaders and their experts. They're experts on missiles. I mean, they actually make missiles. Nobody thought that. But they make missiles. They're highly sophisticated, and they're very tough. But they've been very badly damaged. Nobody else was able to do that but us. Pete, you want to discuss that, please?
Yes, sir. It's been a bad 3 weeks for the Houthis, and it's about to get worse. It's been a devastating campaign, whether it's underground facilities, weapons manufacturing, bunkers, troops in the open, air defense assets. We are not going to relent, and it's only to get more unrelenting until the Houthis declare they will stop shooting at our ships. And we've been very clear at the Iranians as well. They should not continue to provide support to the Houthis, and that message has been made very clear. So we have a lot more options and a lot more pressure to apply, and we know, because we see the reports, how devastating this campaign has been in them, and we will not relent.
We have a great military. There's no military like our military. And despite Biden having given a lot, but nevertheless a pretty small piece, but it was a lot of our military away in Afghanistan, and one of the dumbest situations, I think, and maybe the most embarrassing situation we've ever been involved in, that short period of time in Afghanistan. What a disgrace that was, but left a lot of our military behind, left you see them in their annual parades where they're parading trucks that are armor-plated and different things that they can't, but it's many billions of dollars we left behind. But despite that, we have a tremendous military. That was a very small portion because we rebuilt the military during my first term, and we have great things happening with our military. We also essentially approved a budget, which is in the facility, you'll like to hear this, of $1 trillion, $1 trillion, and nobody's seen anything like it. We have to build our military, and we're very cost conscious, but the military is something that we have to build, and we have to be strong because you got a lot of bad forces out there now. So we're going to be approving a budget, and I'm proud to say, actually, the biggest one we've ever done for the military. We're cutting other things that were under DOGE, but under a lot of other. When you look at a woman getting $2 billion for environmental, and it had nothing to do with environmental, and they had $100 in the bank, and they give her $2 billion. Many of those cases, all that stuff is going to be cut out. But we are getting a very, very powerful military. We have things under order now, the likes of which we've never had before. We've never had the kind of aircraft, the kind of missiles, anything that we have ordered. And it's in many ways too bad that we have to do it, because hopefully we're not going to have to use it. But the military is very, very powerful, and it's going to remain that way.
How do you, Mr. President, please?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to ask you about Iran, because this is the first time we hear that the U.S. is having a direct contact with the Iranians. Is it possible to give us some more information at what level the U.S. is represented?
High level, very high level.
And
we're dealing with the Iranians. We have a very big meeting on Saturday, and we're dealing with them directly. You know, a lot of people say, oh, maybe you're going through surrogates or you're not dealing directly, you're dealing through other countries. No, we're dealing with them directly, and maybe a deal is going to be made. That would be great. It would be really great for Iran, I can tell you that. But hopefully, we're not going to have to get into that. We are meeting very importantly on Saturday at almost the highest level. And we'll see how it works out. Please.
How do you ensure, Mr. President, that these tariffs don't drive U.S. trading partners into the hands of the Chinese?
I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. If they want to be in the hands of the U.S., they don't want to be in the hands of the Chinese. And the Chinese have turned out to be really not very good at that. People that are with us, they're with us. But we cannot be taken advantage of any longer. I used to watch these deals for years. I've been talking about it for years. You know, I've been talking about it for 35 years, how our country is being ripped off. I mean, 30 years ago, it was Japan. Then it was something else. Then it was another group. Then it was China. China's doing the best job of it, frankly. And it's just not going to happen. Not going to happen.
Mr. President, you said the EU has said that they have offered 0 for 0 tariffs on cars and industrial goods. Is that not enough?
Well, the EU, no, it's not. The EU has been very tough over the years. It was, I always say, it was formed to really do damage to the United States in trade. That's the reason it was formed. It was formed with all of the countries from Europe, I guess most of them, not all of them, but most of them. And they formed together to create a little bit of a monopoly situation, to create a unified force against the United States for trade. So they have NATO, which is largely the same countries, and they took advantage of us dollar-wise and militarily until I got there. You know, I was able to get $600 billion from NATO, where they paid NATO because most of these nations weren't even paying. We were paying for NATO, so we're paying them to guard them militarily, and they're screwing us on trade. So that's not a good combination. So now it's really turned around. It's the opposite, and the European Union's been very bad to us. They don't take our cars, like Japan in that sense. They don't take our agricultural product. They don't take anything practically. And yet they send millions of cars in a year, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen, BMWs. They're sending millions and millions of cars into the U.S., but we don't have a car that's been sold to the European Union or other places, but let's go for the European Union. And it's not going to be that way. It's got to be fair and reciprocal. It's got to be fair. It's not fair. We have a deficit with the European Union of $350 billion. And it's going to disappear fast. And one of the reasons and one of the ways that that can disappear easily and quickly is they're going to have to buy our energy from us because they need it. They're going to have to buy it from us. They can buy it. We can knock off $350 billion in 1 week. They have to buy and commit to buy a like amount of energy. And we have that. You know, we have more energy than any country in the world. I don't know if you know that. He knows everything, but the one thing he may not know, we have more energy than any country in the world. We have more of every kind of energy, every form of energy, from oil and gas to coal. And people talk about, I call it beautiful, clean coal. As you know, Germany is opening up a coal plant a week. They tried the windmills and it didn't work. They tried all the other solutions and they were ready to go out of business. Now they're doing a coal plant a week. China is now up to 2 coal plants. They're opening 2 major coal plants every single week in China, all over China, and then we're not allowed to use coal. Well, we have clean, beautiful coal more than anybody else. We have oil and gas more than anybody else. We have the most energy of any country in the world, including Saudi Arabia, including everybody, by a lot. And I took it to #1. We were #3, and I took it to #1 during my administration. And the reason that we were hurt so badly and the reason that we went into such incredible inflation during Biden is energy. It was also their bad spending, but energy, because they played around with this incredible thing that we had built, this administration had built, and the energy costs went through the roof. And when that went up, everything else followed. Now, if you look at what's happening, you got to see this today. I said, we're going to try and get groceries down, right? An old-fashioned term, but a beautiful term. Eggs. So when I got in, the press went absolutely crazy the first week. They said, eggs have quadrupled in price. I said, I just got here. Tell me about it. And Brooke Rollins and our team did a great job, and eggs are down now 79%, and they're all over the place. And this was a problem that somebody else would have taken a long time to cure. We have energy is down. We have interest rates are down. We have groceries, meaning food is down. We have everything is down at levels that nobody ever thought possible. Energy looks like it's going to be in the $2.50 a gallon range and maybe below that for a car, so for gasoline. So we're really doing amazing. I mean, we're cutting prices because prices got so high, people couldn't live. I mean, the prices for groceries, the prices for standard groceries, standard things were going through the roof. They couldn't live. And now those prices are coming down. So call them groceries, but that's down, energy's down, and interest rates are down. Everything's down. And the interest rates, the beauty there is when we refinance debt, you know, debt's become such a big factor in this country. We're going to start paying debt off with tariffs and other things. But it's such a big factor because the interest rate's so high. Well, now that's coming way down. So our budget's going to look a lot better because interest costs are way down. And I guess I've done that. Okay.
Many Israelis are watching you now on live show. Good. What is your specific way of getting the hostages out from the horrific captivity?
We are trying very hard to get the hostages out. We're looking at another ceasefire. We'll see what happens. But we want to get the hostages out. The Israeli people want the hostages out more than anything. They want the hostages out. This man is working very hard with us to do that. I mean, I don't know. I hope he's being appreciated because he's been a great leader. He's working very, very hard on the hostages and many other things. And there are plenty of things you have to work on. It's a tough place in the world.
I have a good partner.
Yeah, you do have a good partner, and so do we. We're working very hard on the hostages.
If you're going to negotiate a new deal with Iran, can you elaborate how it's going to be more effective than the JCPOA?
Well, I can't really say that, but I think it'll be different and maybe a lot stronger. But they were so happy when we made that first deal because we did get a lot out. You know, I had people right in this office, this beautiful Oval Office. They came in, 10 people, hostages, you know that. And I said to them, so how was it? And the stories they told me, I mean, as an example, I said to them, was there any sign of love? You were there, 10 people. It's only 10, but it's pretty representative. Did the Hamas show any signs of, like, help or liking you? Did they wink at you? Did they give you a piece of bread extra? Did they give you a meal on the side, like, you know, you think of doing? Like what happened in Germany, what happened elsewhere. People would try and help people that were in unbelievable distress. They said no. I said, all of them. I said, did they ever wink at you like, you'll be okay? You're going to be okay? No, they didn't do that. They'd slap us. The hatred is unbelievable. And the lives, you know, they lived in a pipe, not really a tunnel, it was a pipe. And they always thought they were suffocating, they were going to suffocate. And then they'd open up the pipe, and it was like 3.5 feet high. This isn't, you know, we hear tunnels bad, but pipes are worse. And the stories I heard were incredible. But I just said, was there any sign of potential love or affection? And there were none whatsoever. It was amazing to me. There was nothing like, here, take this, it's a little extra meal or something. They lived like hell. I don't know. They seemed to be, they were amazing to me because they seemed to be pretty normal. They weren't scarred, but I guarantee underneath they have to be scarred. And one was there for 356 days. Another was there for about 180 days, you know, a long time. These are people that have been really, really horribly treated. I've never seen anything like it, actually. I was very surprised to hear the answer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Are there 2 or 3 countries that are on your list that you feel are farther along in getting their tariffs lowered?
I think there are many that want to get rid of tariffs right now. European Union, I mean, as badly as they've treated us, they've brought their car tariffs essentially off. I guess they brought it down to 2.5, and I hear maybe to nothing. But it's not only tariffs, it's non-monetary tariffs. It's tariffs where they put things on that make it impossible for you to sell a car. It's not a money thing. They make it so difficult, the standards and the tests. They drop a bowling ball on the top of your car from 20 feet up in the air, and if there's a little dent, they say, no, I'm sorry, your car doesn't qualify. When the same car from Germany or anything would dent likewise, unless you can have an army tank, it's going to dent. So they come up with rules and regulations that are just designed for one reason, that you can't sell your product in those countries, and we're not going to let that happen. Those are called non-monetary barriers. They make barriers that are so tough that it's impossible to qualify. So tariffs are a big part of it, but there's another big part of it, and that's barriers. they also do something else. They manipulate their currency, and they drive it down. They want to drive it. They want to have low currencies. You know, it sounds better to have a high currency, a strong dollar or whatever. But they bring their currency down, and when it competes with our currency, it's very hard to sell a tractor. It's very hard to sell product because their currency is low and ours is much higher relatively. And so it makes it very hard. I speak to a lot of companies that do business, tractor companies, and they say it's so hard to sell because what they've done is they've lowered the yen or they've lowered the yuan or they've lowered their currency, so that it's very hard to compete. We don't want that either. So we have a lot of things that we're talking about, but we're going to fix it properly, and it's going to be fair to everybody. And in the end, I think we're going to have a world that does a lot better, you know. But they have to respect the United States. And nobody but me would do this. Nobody but me would do this. You know, it would be nice to serve, a nice, easy term. But we have an opportunity to change the fabric of our country. We have an opportunity to reset the table on trade. We lose billions of dollars. We lose close to $2 trillion a year on trade. We lose $1 trillion a year to China. $1 trillion. We lose hundreds of billions of dollars a year on trade to China. We lose hundreds of billions of dollars overall, probably close to $2 trillion. Why would we do that? Number one, why would we do that? And then you have to say, is it sustainable? Then you hear about all of the people that say, well, deficits. If we have a deficit with the country, or if the country has a big surplus with us, like China has a massive surplus, that they take and they spend on their military. Well, we don't want that. I don't want them to take $500, $600 billion a year and spend it on their military. I don't want them spending money on their military. And I shouldn't have to spend money. We shouldn't have to spend it either. Because, you know, hopefully, and I said this to President Xi, hopefully it's money that we're never going to use. In other words, because we're not going to use those incredible weapons that we have and that they have. We don't want that. So it's going to be very interesting. It's the only chance our country will have to reset the table. Because no other president would be willing to do what I'm doing or to even go through it. Now, I don't mind going through it because I see a beautiful picture at the end. But we are making tremendous progress with a lot of countries, and the countries that really took advantage of us are now saying, please negotiate. You know why? Because they're getting beaten badly because of what's happening. They're getting beaten badly. They're being devalued as countries. But it's the only chance we're going to have to reset the table on trade. And when we do, we're going to come out unbelievably well. We're going to have a strong country economically again. And we're going to have those factories that are empty all over the United States. We've lost 90,000 plants and factories. Think of this, 90,000, you wouldn't think it's possible. 90,000 plants and factories since NAFTA, which was, by the way, the worst trade deal ever developed, ever had by any country anywhere, NAFTA. And I terminated NAFTA. Everybody said it would be impossible. And I terminated it through Congress. We terminated it. You had to get it through Congress. It was a trap. It was a horrible thing. And we got it done. And we went to the USMCA, which was much better. The problem is they cheat. They cheat like crazy. Canada cheats, Mexico cheats, just one of those things. But we are resetting a table, and we're going to have great trade, and we're going to have a very strong country. Our country is going to be at a level that has maybe never been, or maybe, you know, our country was the strongest, believe it or not, from 1870 to 1913. You know why? It was all tariff-based. We had no income tax. Then in 1913, some genius came up with the idea of let's charge the people of our country, not foreign countries that are ripping off our country. And the country was never that kind of wealth. We had so much wealth, we didn't know what to do with our money. We had meetings, we had committees, and these committees worked tirelessly to study one subject. We have so much money. What are we going to do with it? Who are we going to give it to? And I hope we're going to be in that position again.
Mr. President, do you plan to reduce the tariffs that your government put on Israeli goods, 17%?
On where?
On Israeli goods, the 17%.
Well, we're talking about a whole new trade. Maybe not. maybe not. Don't forget, we help Israel a lot. You know, we give Israel $4 billion a year. That's a lot. Congratulations, by the way. That's pretty good. But we give Israel billions of dollars a year. Billions. It's one of the highest of, and we give a lot of countries money. You wouldn't believe if I said we give Afghanistan a lot of money, didn't it? Because that was a Biden deal, another Biden deal. Not only did he embarrass us with that, but they give them billions of dollars, Afghanistan, right? So, but no, we take good care of our friends, and we don't take care of our enemies. We're not taking care of our enemies anymore, but we do take care of our friends.
Mr. Berman from the Times of Israel. The IDF is fighting again in the Gaza Strip. I myself might be called up in a month. Do you think that's the way to pressure Hamas to get to a deal? And do you think blocking humanitarian aid is also an effective pressure?
Well, you know how I feel about the Gaza Strip. I think it's an incredible piece of important real estate, and I think it's something that we would be involved in, but you know, having a peace force like the United States there, controlling and owning the Gaza Strip would be a good thing. Because right now, all it is for years and years, all I hear about is killing and Hamas and problems. And if you take the people, the Palestinians, and move them around to different countries, and you have plenty of countries that will do that, and you really have a freedom zone. You call it the freedom zone, a free zone, a zone where people aren't going to be killed every day. That's a hell of a place. It's you know what I call it, a great location that nobody wants to live in, because they really don't. And when they have good living, real living, where Hamas and all of the problems they have, the level of death on the Gaza Strip is just incredible. And I've said it. I don't understand why Israel ever gave it up. Israel owned it. It wasn't this man, so I can say it. He wouldn't have given it up. I know him very well. There's no way. They took oceanfront property and they gave it to people for peace. How did that work out? Not good.
Is the immigration, sorry, Mr. President, is the immigration plan still on the agenda?
Which immigration?
From Gaza. From Gaza.
All it is a concept that I had that I think is good, and now people are copying it. You know, maybe you want to tell people are talking about the Trump plan. Gee, why don't we do that? Would you like to answer that question?
I think what the president talked about is, first of all, to give people a choice. You know, Gazans were closed in, and every other place, including in arenas of battle. I mean, whether it's Ukraine or Syria or any other place, people could leave. Gaza was the only place where they locked them in. We didn't lock them in. They were locked in. And what is wrong with giving people a choice? Now, we've been talking, including over lunch, about some countries, I won't go into them right now, that are saying, you know, if Gazans want to leave, we want to take them in. And I think this is the right thing to do. If you give, you know, it's going to take years to rebuild Gaza. In the meantime, people can have an option. The president has a vision. Countries are responding to that vision. We're working on it. I hope we'll have good news for you.
I will say people really do love that vision. It's a long-term vision, but so importantly is to have that be a safe field, because you're right smack in the middle of the Middle East. You're right along Israel. It should have never, ever been given away. It shouldn't have been given away by Israel. I don't know why they did it. I mean, I do know why, because they were promised peace, but that didn't work out too well, because it's one of the most dangerous pieces of land anywhere in the world. Gaza is one of the most dangerous places in the world. So they gave it away for a good intention, and it didn't work out that way. And a lot of people like my concept, but you know, there are other concepts that I like too. And there are some concepts I don't like. You know what I don't like? The way it is now. Because right now it's a dangerous death trap, Gaza. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Can you talk a little bit about your potential meeting with Vladimir Putin? Do you still plan to meet with him? Could that happen in Saudi Arabia? And maybe you could elaborate as well a little bit on not providing tariffs on Russia, sir.
So the reason we're not talking about tariffs with Russia is because we're not doing business essentially with Russia, because they're in a war. And I'm not happy about what's going on with the bombing, because they're bombing like crazy right now. They're bombing. I don't know what's happening there. That's not a good situation. So we're meeting with Russia. We're meeting with Ukraine. and we're getting sort of close, but I'm not happy with all the bombing that's going on the last week or so. Horrible. It's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing.
You're watching the live, as it turns out, bit of a press conference from the Oval Office in the White House. Again, Prime Minister Netanyahu there, along with his entourage, sitting with the president, covering a wide range of issues here. And I still have our guests and experts and analysts in the studio here. Ambassador, I want to come right back to you. I think we're right on a point here. You called it a honey trap, but it does appear, as the president revealed now, that there are direct talks set to take place Saturday between the U.S. and Iran, that this may have been the reason to bring Netanyahu in close right now.
Yeah, he really dropped a bombshell. Not only that, he said it's almost the highest level. The highest level is Khamenei. Next highest level would be maybe Pezeshkian, which is the prime minister over there, maybe the foreign minister and others. This is something which is very serious, very significant, and I think that they needed Netanyahu's support.
Is this going to be a hard thing for Netanyahu to own? Do you think, sort of coming back here to say, wait, what just happened over there?
I can just imagine Biden doing that. What would have come out of Netanyahu and his government? So here with Trump...
I mean, we heard Netanyahu say, hey, yes, we're going to give diplomacy a chance. Right. The president's leading this.
Right.
Interesting.
So the next level here right now, the second level of defense, of course, for Netanyahu, and that's what we said the challenge would be, what are the parameters of this talks and what should be the results?
Nicola, where do we begin? You look talk about the Gaza situation here right now, that they're working on another deal, that there's all these talks. We hear the president going on and on about sort of returning to his Riviera concept here, a U.S. peace force, we'll call it a freedom zone. There's a lot of quotable comments from the president, again, when it comes to Gaza. I think the head's spinning again on this issue.
A lot, and it seems like even when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu chimed in, the two talked about this, Netanyahu being a little bit more...
Revealing this was a topic at lunch.
Absolutely. Revealing that also when it comes to the Gaza Riviera, that it's a choice, something that Netanyahu continues to try and be a little bit more firm, even